The locomotive's whistle tore through the morning air like a scream, and Eliza Hartwell felt it in her bones, the sound of her last chance at escape dying on the wind. Red Hollow's train station wasn't much to look at. Weathered wood planks, a crooked sign that had seen better decades, and a platform that tilted slightly to the east, as if the whole structure was trying to lean away from the town itself. Fitting, Eliza thought. Even the buildings wanted to leave. She stood there with her satchel clutched against her chest, her dark hair pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. She'd dressed carefully that morning, her best traveling dress, navy blue with cream buttons, the one she'd saved for interviews in the cities back east. Cities where they didn't care if you taught arithmetic to Irish children or read Shakespeare to girls with dreams bigger than kitchens. The platform held maybe a dozen other souls, all carefully avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Pemberton, the banker's wife, actually turned her entire body away when Eliza's eyes swept past. Two young men in ranch clothes studied their boots like they contained the secrets of the universe. Even old Samuel, who'd always tipped his hat to her on Sunday mornings, found something fascinating to examine in the distance. Exile tasted like ash and smelled like coal smoke. All aboard for Cheyenne. Cheyenne, Laramie, and points east. The conductor's voice cut through her thoughts. Her fingers tightened on the satchel handle. Inside, 3 books, 2 dresses, a tintype of her mother, and a letter of termination that used the word unsuitable 6 times. Unsuitable for education, unsuitable for society, unsuitable for Red Hollow's vision of proper womanhood. The real crime? She'd treated the Martinez children, whose father worked the dangerous mines, with the same respect she showed the mayor's daughter. She'd let Sarah Chen practice her reading aloud, even though her accent made some parents uncomfortable. She'd assigned the same Shakespeare scenes to both boys and girls, ignoring the doctrine that females needed simpler material for their simpler minds. Revolutionary acts, apparently. In Red Hollow, equality was a disease, and she'd been its most infectious carrier. "Miss, you boarding or not?" The conductor stood at the steps, one hand on the rail, impatience etched into every line of his weathered face. Behind him, the train car beckoned, worn velvet seats, the promise of motion, of distance, of anywhere but here. Eliza took one step forward. Then a hand caught her wrist. Not roughly, not demanding, but firm enough to stop her heart mid-beat. "Don't leave." She turned, already knowing the voice but not believing it. Caleb Ward stood 3 feet away, his hat in his other hand, his sun-darkened face set in an expression she'd never seen before. Something desperate and determined and damn near terrified. The quiet rancher. The man who'd brought his niece to her classroom every morning and picked her up every afternoon, always with a polite nod, never with conversation. Tall. Built like someone who'd spent his whole life wrestling cattle in storms, with eyes the color of winter sky and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains ringing their valley. "Mr. Ward," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I have a train to catch." "I know." He didn't let go. "Don't catch it." Around them, the platform had gone silent. Every eye that had avoided her now locked onto this scene with rabid attention. In a town starved for gossip, this was a feast. "Let go of my arm." "Not until you hear me out." "There's nothing to hear. I'm leaving. This town made that decision for me. This town's a bunch of cowards." His voice rose, carrying across the platform. Mrs. Pemberton gasped. "And you're not a coward, Eliza. That's the whole damn problem." She'd never heard him string together that many words at once. In 6 months of daily interactions, their conversations had consisted of good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for teaching Sarah. Now he stood here, grip steady on her wrist, saying her first name like he had the right to it. "Mr. Ward, Caleb, and I'm asking you to stay." "Why?" The word burst out sharper than she intended. "So I can watch this town celebrate my departure. So I can spend my days scrubbing floors since no one will hire a teacher they've branded as dangerous? What exactly am I staying for?" The conductor cleared his throat. "Folks, we got a schedule." Caleb ignored him. "Stay because running won't change anything. Stay because they want you gone, and giving them what they want just proves them right. Stay because—" He stopped, something flickering across his face that looked almost like pain. Stay, because I'm asking. That's not a reason. It's the only one I've got. The train whistle screamed again, urgent now. Final call. Last chance. Eliza stared at him, this man she barely knew, who was offering her nothing but more suffering in a town that had already broken her once. His hand on her wrist was warm, solid, like an anchor in a current trying to sweep her away. You don't know what you're asking. Yeah, I do. I'm asking you to be as stubborn and brave as you've been every day since you came here. I'm asking you to fight. I already fought. I lost. You lost a battle. Doesn't mean the war's over. Miss! The conductor was climbing aboard now. Last call! Her pulse hammered against Caleb's fingers. She could feel it, that thundering proof that she was terrified, furious, and so tired of being strong when strength got you nothing but scorn. The smart choice was obvious. Get on that train. Find a city where progressive schools needed teachers. Start over somewhere people didn't know her name or her shame. Rebuild a life from scratch. Careful and small and safe. Safe. God, she was so sick of safe. Give me one good reason, she heard herself say. One real reason why staying matters. Caleb's grip loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. Because Sarah cries every night. Because the Martinez kids lost the first teacher who ever said their names right. Because Jenny Thornton told me she wanted to be a lawyer until the new teacher told her girls don't need mathematics. His voice dropped. Because a town that can destroy someone like you is a town that'll keep destroying people until someone stands up and says enough. And you think I'm that someone? I think you already were. I'm just asking you not to stop now. The train lurched forward with a mechanical groan. The conductor leaned out, shaking his head. That's it! Next train's in 4 days. 4 days. Or forever. Eliza looked at the train car, at her escape disappearing in a cloud of steam and cinder. Then she looked at Caleb Ward, this unexpected storm in rancher's clothing, who was offering her nothing but difficulty and danger and the chance to matter. Her fingers loosened on the satchel. I must be out of my mind, she whispered. Probably. For the first time, something almost like a smile touched his mouth. But you'll have company. The train pulled away, metal wheels shrieking against rails, carrying away her carefully planned retreat. She watched it go, that snake of steel and steam and surrender, until it was nothing but a smudge on the horizon. Then she turned to face the platform, to face the staring eyes and scandalized whispers, to face the town that had tried to exile her and failed. Mrs. Pemberton stood frozen, her fan clutched tight enough to crack the delicate ribs. The ranch hands had stopped examining their boots. Even Samuel looked up, something like hope flickering across his weathered face. Caleb finally released her wrist, but he didn't step away. So, he said quietly, what now? What now? The question of her life. Eliza straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and met the eyes of every person on that platform who'd turned their back on her. Now I need to find work. Since this town has made it abundantly clear I'm unsuitable for teaching, I'll need to be unsuitable somewhere else. I might know a place. Of course you do. She allowed herself a bitter smile. Let me guess. Some generous soul willing to hire the town pariah out of the goodness of their heart? Nothing that noble. Caleb settled his hat back on his head. Mrs. Chen runs a laundry and alteration shop near the east edge of town. She's been needing help since her daughter married and moved to Denver. Might not be what you're used to. I'm not proud, Mr. Ward. I'm just unemployed. Caleb. What? My name. If we're going to war together, you should probably use it. Together. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them had time to examine. Fine, Caleb. His name felt strange in her mouth, intimate in a way that made her uncomfortable. Where is this laundry? I'll show you. But first, he glanced around the platform at the dispersing crowd still shooting looks over their shoulders. First, you should know what you're really up against. I think I have a fairly clear picture of small-town prejudice. Thank you. I'm not talking about prejudice. His voice dropped. I'm talking about Victor Hale. The name landed like a stone in still water, ripples of unease spreading through her chest. She'd heard it, of course. Hard to live in Red Hollow for 6 months without hearing about Victor Hale, though the man himself remained a ghost, referenced often, seen rarely. The businessman. The man who owns this town. Caleb started walking, and she fell into step beside him. Owns the bank. Owns half the commercial buildings on Main Street. Owns enough secrets to control the rest. Sheriff dances when Victor pulls the strings. Mayor clears his throat when Victor has a cold. And he cares about a disgraced schoolteacher because you don't dance. You don't clear your throat. You don't ask permission to exist. They'd reached the edge of the platform now, stepping down onto the dusty street. Victor Hale built his empire on fear and obedience. People like you, people who refuse to be afraid, are dangerous to that empire. I haven't done anything to him. Not yet. But you will. It's in your nature. Caleb's mouth quirked. You can't help being unsuitable. Despite everything, she almost laughed. Is that supposed to be encouraging? It's supposed to be a warning. Staying here, fighting here. It's not just about winning back your teaching position. It's about going up against a power structure that's been in place since this town was founded. You ready for that? Was she? Eliza looked around at Red Hollow's main street, at the false-fronted buildings and the people scurrying about their business, carefully not noticing her. Somewhere in this town, in some carefully appointed office, sat a man who'd built his kingdom on keeping people small. No, she said honestly, but I don't think I can live with myself if I run. Good enough. They walked in silence for a few minutes, leaving the center of town behind. The buildings grew shabbier, the streets less maintained. This was the Red Hollow that polite society pretended not to see. The immigrant quarter, where Irish and Chinese and Mexican families carved out existences on the margins, doing the work that built the town while remaining invisible to those who benefited. Mrs. Chen's laundry occupied a narrow building squeezed between a boarding house and a closed-up shop. Steam billowed from the windows, carrying the scent of lye soap and hot starch. A hand-painted sign swung gently in the breeze. Chen Laundry and Alterations, finest work, fair prices. Caleb pushed open the door, releasing a wave of humid air that made Eliza's dress stick to her skin instantly. Inside, the small front room was dominated by a wooden counter, behind which hung finished garments wrapped in brown paper and string. The real work happened in the back. Eliza could hear the slosh of water, the rhythmic thump of irons being worked, voices calling to each other in Cantonese. A woman emerged from the steam like a ship from fog. Mrs. Chen was small, barely 5 feet, with iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun and hands that bore the scars of a lifetime handling hot irons and caustic soaps. Her eyes, sharp as broken glass, took in Eliza from head to toe in one sweeping assessment. Mr. Ward. Her English carried a musical accent. You bring me the unsuitable teacher everyone talks about. I bring you someone who needs work and won't quit when it gets hard. Mrs. Chen circled Eliza slowly, like a general inspecting new recruits. You know laundry work, alterations, pressing? No, ma'am. You know anything useful? I can read, write, calculate, and I learn quickly. Cannot eat reading, cannot wear calculating. But there was something speculative in Mrs. Chen's expression now. Why you want work here? Nice lady like you should find nice, easy jobs somewhere else. There is no somewhere else, Mrs. Chen. Red Hollow has made that abundantly clear. Ah, so you stay because nowhere to go. This is not good reason. I'm staying because I'm tired of letting fear win. The words came out harder than Eliza intended. I'm staying because I treated your daughter with respect in my classroom, and every other child with immigrant parents, and apparently that's revolutionary enough to get me fired. I'm staying because if I run now, I prove them right, that people like us don't belong, that equality is too dangerous, that the Victor Hales of the world get to decide who matters. The shop had gone quiet. From the back room, several faces peered through the steam, other workers, Eliza realized, listening to this exchange. Mrs. Chen's expression hadn't changed. People like us? People who don't fit their narrow little boxes. People who refuse to disappear just because it's convenient for them. For a long moment, Mrs. Chen simply stared. Then she turned to Caleb. She always talked like giving speech? Seems to be her natural state. Cannot give speeches to dirty laundry. Shirts do not care about revolution. But she was moving behind the counter now, pulling out a ledger. Can start tomorrow. 6 in morning until work finished. I pay fair, not generous. You work hard, you eat dinner here, my daughter not here, I cook too much. You work lazy, you find other job. Understand? Eliza's breath caught. You're hiring me? I need help. You need work. Also, Mrs. Chen's stern expression softened just a fraction. My Sarah, she still practices her reading every night. Uses books you gave her before they made you leave. Girl wants to be doctor someday. Stupid dream maybe, but you made her believe stupid dreams worth having. It's not stupid. In this town, very stupid, but I like her stupid dream better than their small minds. Mrs. Chen closed the ledger with a definitive thump. 6 in morning, do not be late. Cannot give speeches to excuse lateness. I'll be here. Eliza extended her hand across the counter. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You won't regret this. The older woman's calloused hand gripped hers firmly. Maybe I will. But regret interesting, yes? Better than boring, safe life. Outside, the afternoon sun had burned off the morning cool, leaving the street dusty and bright. Caleb walked beside her, hands in his pockets, that almost smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, he said, that's one problem solved. Now I just need to find somewhere to live. I gave up my room at the boarding house when I thought I was leaving. Eliza tried to calculate how much money she had left. Not much. The boarding house had taken most of her last salary, and she'd spent the rest on her train ticket, now wasted. Already handled. She stopped walking. I'm sorry, what? Mrs. Chen's got a room above the shop. Used to be her daughter's before she married. Small, but clean. She'll rent it to you for less than the boarding house charged. You arranged all this. Made some inquiries. When? I only decided not to get on that train 20 minutes ago. Caleb's ears went slightly red. Maybe I was hoping you'd decide that. Maybe I had a backup plan ready. You had a backup plan. For me. A woman you barely know. I know you stood up to the school board for 3 hours, arguing for equal education until your voice went hoarse. I know you walked Sarah home when she got sick, even though it meant missing your own dinner. I know you spent your own money buying books for kids whose parents couldn't afford them. He met her eyes. That's enough to know. Something warm and uncomfortable lodged in Eliza's chest. She didn't know what to do with kindness anymore. Respect, admiration, even hatred, those she could handle. But this quiet, practical care from someone who owed her nothing? That was dangerous territory. Why? The question came out softer than she intended. Why does any of this matter to you? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, watching the street, the people passing by without seeing them. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. Sarah's not my niece, she's my daughter. Eliza's breath stopped. Her mother, my wife, died when Sarah was 2. Fever took her in 3 days. Before that, though, before she got sick, Mary used to talk about the future, about Sarah growing up educated, learning things, having choices. He swallowed hard. Mary couldn't read. Not really. Enough to get by, but she hated it, hated feeling stupid, hated having doors closed because she didn't have the right words. She made me promise, made me swear, that Sarah would be different, that Sarah would have every chance Mary never got. Caleb, when you came to town, when I heard you treated every kid the same, rich or poor, boy or girl, I thought maybe Mary's dream had a chance. Sarah came home talking about stories, about mathematics, about a teacher who said girls could be anything. His voice roughened. Then they fired you, because you kept that promise better than I ever could. And I couldn't just let you leave, couldn't let Sarah lose that again, couldn't let this town win. The street blurred slightly. Eliza blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall in public. She'd cried enough in private, in her rented room, into her pillow where no one could use her grief as proof of weakness. Sarah's lucky to have you. Sarah's stubborn like her mother, drives me half crazy. But pride warmed his voice. Like someone else I know. I'm not stubborn, I'm principled. Spoken like someone who's never met herself. Caleb started walking again. Come on, I'll show you the room before you have to be at work tomorrow. Fair warning, Mrs. Chen's cooking is incredible, but she will judge you if you don't eat enough. I think I can handle being judged for my appetite. It'll make a nice change from being judged for my morals. They walked back toward the laundry, past buildings that would become familiar landmarks in her new life. A life she hadn't planned, in a place that didn't want her, fighting battles she wasn't sure she could win. But for the first time since the school board meeting, since the letter of termination, since the whispers and the stares and the slow, grinding exile, Eliza Hartwell felt something other than despair. She felt angry, and anger, she was learning, was so much more useful than sorrow. The room above Chen's laundry was exactly as advertised, small, clean, and sparse. A narrow bed, a bureau with a mirror, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. The walls were bare except for a small shelf, and everything smelled faintly of soap and starch. Home. Eliza set her satchel on the bed, the weight of her few possessions suddenly overwhelming. This was it. Her entire life, reduced to what fit in a leather bag. Everything else, her books, her teaching materials, her carefully collected resources, still sat in boxes at the boarding house, waiting to be reclaimed. A knock at the door. Mrs. Chen entered without waiting for an answer, carrying a tray with tea and what looked like steamed buns. "Eat," she commanded, setting the tray on the bureau. "You too skinny. Need strength for tomorrow." "Mrs. Chen, you don't have to. Not have to. Choose to." The older woman busied herself straightening items that didn't need straightening. "You know why I help you? Not because you good teacher, though you are. Not because you treat my Sarah with respect, though you did." "Then why?" "Because 30 years ago, I come here from San Francisco. Had nothing. Husband dead from railroad work, baby daughter, no English, no money. This town—" Mrs. Chen's mouth tightened. "This town make very clear I not belong. Not suitable. Not welcome. Sound familiar?" "Yes." "Old woman, she run laundry then. Mrs. O'Reilly, Irish, also not suitable. She give me job, give me room, give me chance." Mrs. Chen met Eliza's eyes. "She dead now, 10 years. But before she die, she tell me, pass it forward. Help next unsuitable woman who needs fighting chance. So you're paying forward her kindness. More than kindness, revolution." Mrs. Chen smiled, and it transformed her stern face. "Mrs. O'Reilly," she say, "every time we help unsuitable women survive, we make crack in their wall. Small crack, yes, but enough small cracks, wall falls down. I don't know if I can be part of anyone's revolution. I just want to survive." "Same thing." Mrs. Chen headed for the door, then paused. "You meet Victor Hale yet?" "No, everyone mentions him, but I've never seen him." "You will. Men like him, they need to own everything, control everything. Woman like you, woman who not owned, not controlled, you make him nervous. Nervous men dangerous." She studied Eliza. "You understand what you started today? Staying here, taking this work, refusing to disappear?" "I think I'm beginning to." "Good. Then you know, this not end neat and pretty. This end messy, maybe painful. Maybe you wish you got on that train." Mrs. Chen's voice softened. "But also maybe you change something. Maybe you make crack in wall big enough to matter. Worth the risk?" Eliza looked around her tiny room, thought about the work waiting for her at dawn, about the town that would watch her every move looking for proof of failure, thought about Caleb's hand on her wrist, about Sarah crying at night, about all the children who deserved better than they were getting. "Worth the risk," she said. "We see." Mrs. Chen opened the door. "Eat buns, sleep. Tomorrow, real work begins." Alone again, Eliza sat on the narrow bed and let herself feel the magnitude of what she'd chosen. No dramatic speeches now. No righteous anger, just her, in a small room, eating steamed buns while the reality settled in. She'd declared war on a town, and towns, she suspected, didn't lose gracefully. 6 in the morning came brutally early. Eliza stumbled down the stairs in darkness, her hands raw from yesterday's trial by fire. Mrs. Chen hadn't been exaggerating about the work. Laundry wasn't just washing and drying. It was hauling water, stoking fires, wrestling wet fabric, dodging steam burns, and keeping her hands moving through pain until everything was clean, pressed, and perfect. Her back ached. Her shoulders screamed. Her fingers had blisters on top of blisters. She'd never been happier. There was something pure about physical labor, about producing tangible results. A dirty shirt became clean, a wrinkled dress became smooth. No debate, no politics, no one telling her that her methods were unsuitable. Just work, honest and real. Mrs. Chen appeared from the back room, already energetic despite the hour. Good, you early. I think maybe unsuitable teachers sleep late, make excuses. I'm many things, Mrs. Chen. Late isn't one of them. We see if you still early after month of this work. But approval flickered in her eyes. Come. Today you learn pressing, harder than washing, mess up pressing, ruin whole garment. Then we pay customer for damage. The morning passed in a blur of heat and steam and careful attention. Pressing wasn't just running an iron over fabric, it was understanding tension, temperature, the personality of each piece. Silk needed different care than cotton. A man's formal shirt demanded precision. A work dress needed durability. Eliza burned herself twice, scorched one collar. Mrs. Chen made her practice on scrap fabric after that, and discovered muscles she didn't know existed. But slowly, gradually, the rhythm made sense. The dance of heat and pressure and timing. Around noon, the bell above the front door chimed. Eliza glanced up from the shirt she was pressing. Mrs. Chen had finally trusted her with actual customer orders, and froze. The man in the doorway wore a suit that probably cost more than she'd earned in 6 months of teaching. Tall, with silver gray hair, and a face that might have been handsome, if not for the coldness in his pale eyes. He carried himself with the casual authority of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Behind her, Mrs. Chen's sharp intake of breath told Eliza everything she needed to know. Victor Hale. Good afternoon. His voice was cultured, smooth, designed to put people at ease. It had the opposite effect on Eliza. I heard Chen's Laundry had hired new help. Thought I'd stop by and introduce myself. Mrs. Chen moved to the counter, her body language shifting into something defensive. Mr. Hale, what can I do for you? Nothing at all, Mrs. Chen. Your work is always impeccable. But his eyes never left Eliza. I'm here to meet Miss Hartwell, the famous unsuitable teacher, or should I say former teacher. Eliza set down the iron carefully, giving herself time to breathe, to think. Every instinct screamed danger. Mr. Hale, your reputation precedes you. As does yours. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. The woman who thought she could revolutionize education in Red Hollow. Admirable, misguided, but admirable. I didn't try to revolutionize anything. I just treated children like human beings. Ah, yes, your famous equality, very progressive, very unsuitable for a town like ours. He walked closer to the counter, each step measured and deliberate. But that's in the past now. I understand you found new employment. Good. Everyone deserves a second chance. How generous of you. I try to be. His smile widened. Though I must admit some concern. Mrs. Chen runs an excellent business here. It would be unfortunate if her association with controversial figures affected her customer base. The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. Mrs. Chen's hands clenched on the counter, but her voice stayed steady. My customers care about quality work, Mr. Hale. Nothing else. Of course, and I'm sure they'll continue to value quality, as long as the business maintains its reputation for discretion and proper values. He turned back to Eliza. I'm simply suggesting that Red Hollow is a small town with certain expectations. Fighting those expectations rarely ends well. Wouldn't you agree, Miss Hartwell? I would agree that expectations change, Eliza said carefully. History is full of expectations that seem permanent until someone had the courage to question them. Courage. Victor tested the word like tasting wine. Such an interesting choice. Some might call it stubbornness, or pride, or even foolishness. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, and placed it on the counter. Should you ever decide that laundry work isn't fulfilling your potential, come see me. I have connections in Denver. Teaching positions available for qualified candidates willing to relocate. How thoughtful, but I'm quite content where I am. For now. He tipped his hat to Mrs. Chen. Ladies, do keep up the excellent work. Red Hollow thrives when everyone knows their place. The door closed behind him, the bell's cheerful chime grotesquely at odds with the tension he'd left behind. Mrs. Chen snatched up his card and tossed it in the waste bin. That man! Snake with fancy suit. He threatened you because of me. He threatened everyone eventually, his favorite hobby. Mrs. Chen returned to her work with sharp, angry movements. You understand now, this what you face. He not make big scenes, not use fists. He whisper, suggest, make people afraid. Then he sit back and watch them destroy themselves trying to please him. I won't let him hurt your business. Already too late. Moment you walk in here, my business become target. But Mrs. Chen didn't sound regretful. Good. I tired of not being target. Tired of being quiet, invisible, safe. Safe is boring. Rather be unsuitable. Despite the fear coiling in her stomach, Eliza almost laughed. Mrs. Chen, I think you and I are going to get along dangerously well. Probably. Now back to work. Cannot fight empire with wrinkled shirt. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, and Eliza began to understand the social architecture of the laundry. People came here not just for clean clothes, but for information, for connection, for the kind of community that polite society pretended didn't exist. Mrs. Chen knew everyone. She remembered names, asked about children, offered advice in multiple languages. The Irish washerwomen who worked in the back sang while they scrubbed. The Mexican seamstress who came in around 2 made alterations so precise they looked like magic. This was Red Hollow's real backbone. The workers nobody saw, the people who kept the town running while remaining carefully invisible. And Eliza was one of them now. Evening came with the smell of rice and vegetables cooking. Mrs. Chen had been serious about the dinner policy. Everyone working late ate together in the back room, crowded around a table that had seen decades of service. The conversation flowed in 3 languages, punctuated by laughter and gossip and the easy camaraderie of people who'd survived together. Eliza sat quietly, listening, learning the real history of Red Hollow through stories the official chronicles would never tell. The school board meeting, one of the washerwomen said in heavily accented English. I hear you make them very angry. My son, he say you gave speech about respect, about treating all children same. Say it was like watching warrior woman fight dragons. If only dragons were as dangerous as prejudice, Eliza murmured. Maybe same thing. Dragons hoard gold, yes? Rich men hoard power. The woman shrugged. Either way, someone needs slay them. After dinner, Eliza climbed the stairs to her small room, every muscle in her body protesting. She lit the lamp, opened the window to let in the cool evening air, and sat on her bed with the journal she'd been keeping since coming to Red Hollow. Day 1. After the train, she wrote, I stayed. I found work. I made an enemy of the most powerful man in town before noon. Mother always said I had a gift for efficiency. The journal had been her confidant through 6 months of slow exile. Now it would chronicle whatever came next, revolution or ruin, victory or exile part 2. A knock at the door. Come in. Caleb entered, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable in her small space. Mrs. Chen said you met Victor Hale today. News travels fast. In this town? Instant. He stayed near the door, respecting the propriety of the situation, even though they both knew propriety had already condemned her. How bad was it? Polite threats wrapped in concern. He offered me an escape route to Denver. Of course he did. Makes you the problem instead of him. Caleb's jaw tightened. Eliza, it's not too late. You could take his offer, leave with a clean reference instead of what? Fighting, losing, proving him right? She closed the journal. I appreciate your concern, Caleb, but I made my choice on that train platform. I'm not unmaking it because Victor Hale smiled at me with cold eyes. I know, but I needed to offer. Needed to make sure you understood what you're walking into. A war I'll probably lose. Maybe, but you'll lose it swinging. She smiled despite herself. Is that supposed to be encouraging? It's supposed to be honest. He turned to leave, then paused. Sarah asked if you'd come to dinner this Sunday, at the ranch. She wants to show you the book she's been reading. I don't know if that's wise. You've already put yourself at risk by helping me. Eliza. His voice was firm. I'm not afraid of Victor Hale, and I won't let him dictate who comes to my table. Say yes. Yes. Good. The almost smile appeared. Fair warning, Sarah's going to talk your ear off about wanting to be a doctor. I've tried explaining the obstacles, but she won't listen. Good. Obstacles are just challenges in disguise. Spoken like an unsuitable teacher. After he left, Eliza returned to her journal, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood at the window looking out at Red Hollow's dim streets, at the town that wanted her gone. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale sat in his office, plotting how to remove this irritating splinter from his well-ordered world. Somewhere out there, the school board congratulated themselves on maintaining proper standards. Somewhere out there, children went to bed in a town that limited their dreams based on circumstances of birth. One person can't change a whole town, the practical voice in her head whispered. Watch me, she whispered back. Below her window, a figure moved through the shadows. For a moment, Eliza's heart stopped. Had Hale sent someone to watch her already? But then the figure stepped into the lamplight, and she recognized Mrs. Chen, locking up the shop for the night. The old woman looked up, seemed to sense Eliza at the window, and raised one hand in a brief salute. We're in this together, that gesture said. Unsuitable women against the world. Eliza raised her hand in return. Tomorrow would bring more back-breaking work, more whispers, more of Hale's subtle machinations. Tomorrow she'd burn herself on the iron again, probably ruin another caller, definitely earn more blisters. But tonight, in this small room above a laundry run by revolutionaries disguised as washerwomen, Eliza Hartwell allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Hope. 3 weeks into her new life, Eliza discovered that survival had its own brutal mathematics. Her hands had toughened, the blisters giving way to calluses that mapped her transformation from teacher to laborer. The work still exhausted her, hauling water before dawn, wrestling steaming fabric until her shoulders burned, pressing garments with precision while sweat ran down her spine. But exhaustion felt cleaner than shame. At least here, in Mrs. Chen's laundry, her worth was measured in clean collars and perfect pleats, not in her willingness to bow to prejudice. The town, however, hadn't finished testing her resolve. It started small. Mrs. Pemberton, the banker's wife, withdrew her business, citing vague concerns about quality standards. 2 other customers followed within days, their excuses transparently thin. Mrs. Chen said nothing, just worked harder, but Eliza saw the tightness around her eyes, the way she counted coins at the end of each day with increasing worry. Then the vandalism began. Eliza found the first message painted on the laundry's front door on a Tuesday morning. Unsuitable filth. The letters dripped red, garish against the weathered wood. Her stomach turned, but her hand stayed steady as she fetched a bucket and brush. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, arms crossed, face set in stone. Leave it. Let them see what they are. No. Eliza scrubbed harder. That's what they want. To mark us as different, as wrong. I won't give them the satisfaction. Stubborn woman. I learned from the best. They cleaned the door together in silence, removing the slur one stroke at a time. But the message had been delivered. Red Hollow wanted her to know. Staying came with a price. That Sunday, Eliza borrowed Mrs. Chen's mare for the ride to Caleb's ranch. The land opened up beyond town limits, rolling hills giving way to mountains that cut the sky like broken teeth. Beautiful and harsh, just like everything else in this territory. The Ward Ranch wasn't grand, but it was solid. A 2-story house with a wide porch, a barn that had seen better decades but still stood firm, corrals holding horses that looked better fed than half the town's children. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of something delicious. Sarah burst through the front door before Eliza could dismount, all gangly limbs and enthusiasm. At 9 years old, she was already showing signs of the woman she'd become. Her father's stubborn chin, her late mother's dark eyes, and a mind that devoured knowledge like others consumed air. Miss Hartwell, you came. Pa said you might not, but I knew you would because you always keep your promises. Remember when you promised to help me with long division, and you stayed after class 3 days in a row, even though I was terrible at it? And look, she waved a book. I finished Little Women and started 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Pa says Jules Verne is too advanced, but you said reading should challenge us, and... Sarah. Caleb appeared on the porch, wiping his hands on a towel. Let the woman breathe before you talk her to death. But I have so much to tell her. I can see that. Eliza dismounted, letting Sarah take the mare's reins. And I want to hear all of it, but maybe we could sit down first. Your father's cooking smells too good to ignore. Inside, the house was clean but lived in, with the comfortable disorder of two people too busy with survival to fuss over appearances. Books scattered across surfaces, boots by the door, a rifle mounted above the fireplace next to a faded photograph of a woman who must have been Mary. She had Sarah's eyes, gentle and fierce at once. Dinner was simple but perfect. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread that Sarah proudly announced she'd helped bake. They ate at a scarred wooden table, and for the first time in months, Eliza felt something like peace. No whispers, no judgment. Just food and conversation and the easy warmth of people who accepted her exactly as she was. Pa says you met Mr. Hale. Sarah's voice was too casual, the way children sound when they're trying to seem unconcerned about something that terrifies them. I did. Is he as scary as people say? Sarah, Caleb warned. No, it's all right. Eliza set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. Mr. Hale is powerful, and power can be frightening. But he's just a man, sweetheart, and men can be challenged. But he makes people do what he wants. Tommy Martinez's father works at the mine, and Tommy says, Mr. Hale owns it, and when the men tried to ask for better wages, Mr. Hale fired the leaders and everyone got scared and stopped asking. That's how fear works. It makes people smaller than they are. Are you scared of him? Eliza met Sarah's eyes, so earnest, so desperately wanting reassurance. Terrified. But I'm doing it anyway. Why? Because being afraid and doing nothing is worse than being afraid and trying. Caleb's expression softened with something that might have been gratitude or admiration, or both. That's enough interrogation, Sarah. Miss Hartwell came for dinner, not a trial. I don't mind, Eliza smiled. Questions mean thinking. Thinking means growing. Your mother would be proud. The words slipped out before she could catch them. Too intimate, too presumptuous. But Caleb's face didn't close off. Instead, he looked at the photograph above the fireplace, and his voice went quiet. Mary would have liked you. You're both stubborn enough to move mountains through sheer irritation. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. After dinner, Sarah dragged Eliza to her small room, eager to show off her reading progress. The walls were covered with drawings, anatomical sketches copied from a medical text, diagrams of the human heart, lungs, skeleton. Where did you get these? Eliza asked, stunned by their detail. Doc Morrison lets me look at his books when I visit. He says I'm too young to understand, but I do understand, Miss Hartwell. I understand how blood moves and how bones connect and why infections happen. Sarah's voice grew passionate. And I want to learn more. I want to be a doctor and help people, but Pa says it's a hard road, Caleb said from the doorway. Not impossible, just hard. Everything worthwhile is hard. Sarah turned to Eliza. Right? Right. But your father's also right that being a woman in medicine means fighting every step of the way. Schools that won't admit you, patients who won't trust you, colleagues who will undermine you. She sat on Sarah's bed, meeting her eyes. It means years of people telling you that you're unsuitable. But you didn't stop teaching just because they said you were unsuitable. They forced me to stop teaching. That's different. Is it? Because you're still teaching. You're teaching me right now that unsuitable just means you're doing something that scares them. From the doorway, Caleb made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. I'm raising a revolutionary. You're raising a woman who thinks for herself, Eliza corrected. The world needs more of those. The ride back to town happened in twilight, the mountains dark against a sky streaked with orange and purple. Caleb insisted on accompanying her, claiming concern about bandits, but really just wanting to talk without Sarah's enthusiastic interruptions. Thank you, he said after they'd ridden in comfortable silence for a while, for not lying to her, for treating her dreams like they matter. They do matter. To you, maybe. To me. But to the rest of the world? He shook his head. I watch her draw those medical diagrams and I think about all the doors that'll slam in her face. All the ways this town, this whole damn territory, will try to crush what makes her special. Then we make sure she's too strong to crush. We? You think you're fighting this alone, raising her alone? Eliza's voice sharpened. Every girl who dreams bigger than her circumstances, every child who refuses to accept that their birth determines their worth, they're all Sarah. And if we don't fight for them, who will? That's a heavy burden to carry. Someone has to carry it. They'd reached the edge of town now, where respectability began and Eliza's welcome ended. Caleb slowed his horse, his expression troubled. Victor Hale came by the ranch yesterday. Ice slid down Eliza's spine. What did he want? To warn me. Very politely, very civilly. Said my association with you was causing talk. Suggested that a man raising a daughter alone should be more careful about appearances. Caleb's jaw clenched. Implied that the school board might reconsider Sarah's enrollment if I continued to fraternize with disgraced teachers. He threatened your daughter because you gave me a job reference? He didn't threaten. He never threatens. He just suggests possibilities, plants seeds of fear, and waits for people to destroy their own relationships trying to protect themselves. What did you tell him? I told him to get off my property before I helped him leave. A grim smile. He didn't appreciate that. Caleb, you have Sarah to think about. If he goes after her schooling, let him try. I'll teach her myself if I have to. What I won't do is abandon people because some tin-pot tyrant tells me to. He met her eyes. I made a choice on that train platform too, Eliza. I'm not unmaking it either. She wanted to argue, to insist he protect himself and Sarah, to push him away before Hale's vendetta expanded to include everyone she cared about. But the words stuck in her throat, tangled with gratitude and fear, and something warmer that she didn't have time to examine. Be careful, she said instead. You too. Back in her small room above the laundry, Eliza lit the lamp and opened her journal. But before she could write, voices drifted up from the street below. Angry, aggressive, male. She moved to the window. 4 men stood outside the laundry's front door. Even in the dim light, she recognized 2 of them. Ranch hands who drank at the saloon, the type who measured their worth in how much they could intimidate others. One held a bottle. Another had what looked like a paint can. Not tonight, Eliza muttered, already moving toward the stairs. She reached the front door just as the first splash of paint hit the wood. The men jumped back, startled by her sudden appearance. Evening, gentlemen. Her voice cut through the night air like a blade. Lovely night for vandalism. The stars really complement the cowardice. The one with the paint can, a thick-necked brute named Carson, recovered first. Go back inside, teacher. This doesn't concern you. Interesting. Since you're painting my workplace, I'd say it concerns me quite directly. Your workplace? He laughed, the sound ugly. You mean the Chinaman's laundry? Where you wash clothes like a servant? How far the mighty have fallen. I prefer to think of it as finding honest work after being fired for having principles, but I can see how that concept might confuse you. One of the others stepped forward, emboldened by drink. You think you're smart, don't you? Think you're better than us? I think I'm smarter than anyone who vandalizes businesses in the dark because they're too cowardly to face their targets in daylight. Does that count as better? You tell me. Careful, teacher. Carson's voice dropped to something menacing. Wouldn't want you to have an accident. These streets can be dangerous at night. Is that a threat? Just friendly advice. How thoughtful. Here's some friendly advice in return. I know your names. I know where you work. And if anything happens to this business, to me, or to anyone associated with this laundry, I will make sure everyone in Red Hollow knows exactly who to blame. She smiled, all teeth and fury. I may be unsuitable, but I'm not silent. Touch this building again, and you'll discover just how loud unsuitable women can be. For a moment, the night balanced on a knife's edge. 4 drunk men with paint and anger against one woman with nothing but words and absolute conviction. The smart money would have been on the men. But Eliza had spent months being crushed under the weight of propriety, swallowing her rage, making herself smaller to fit their expectations. She was done being small. Carson must have seen something in her face, some edge that warned he was closer to violence than he realized, because he stepped back. You're crazy. Probably, but I'm crazy and awake and apparently willing to have this conversation all night. Your move. They left, muttering threats that faded with distance. Eliza watched until they disappeared around a corner, then leaned against the doorframe, her legs suddenly weak. Impressive. She spun. Misses. Chen stood in the shadows near the staircase, holding a cleaver that caught the lamplight. How long have you been there? Long enough to see you face down 4 drunk men with nothing but sharp words. Mrs. Chen lowered the cleaver. Also long enough to know that now they will come back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they will come back. Men like that, they cannot allow women to make them look weak. I'm sorry. I should have just called for help. Let you handle it. Handle it how? Smile? Bow? Thank them for only painting our door instead of burning it down? Mrs. Chen shook her head. No, you did right thing. You showed them we not afraid. Fear is what they want. We give them anything but fear. We win. We might win ourselves right into serious trouble. We already in serious trouble. Moment you stayed, moment I hired you, we declared ourselves unsuitable women. Cannot be unsuitable and safe. Have to choose. Eliza looked at the fresh paint dripping down the door, red streaks that looked like wounds in the darkness. Are we making the right choice? Too late to ask now. Already chose. Now we see where choice leads us. The next morning, Eliza woke to pounding on her door and Mrs. Chen's urgent voice. Get up now! She stumbled out of bed, pulled on a dressing gown, and opened the door to find Mrs. Chen's face tight with fury. What happened? Come see. The laundry's front room looked like a battlefield. Every basket of clean laundry had been dumped on the floor, garments trampled into the dirt, the pressing table overturned, the cash box smashed open, empty, and painted across the back wall in the same red paint, leave or burn. They came back, Mrs. Chen said quietly. I sleeping upstairs. Heard nothing. They must come through back door, do this, leave like ghosts. Eliza moved through the destruction, her mind calculating the damage. Hours of work destroyed. Money stolen. Not much, but enough to hurt. And the message, brutal in its clarity. Leave or burn. We call the sheriff, she said. Sheriff? Mrs. Chen laughed, bitter. Sheriff works for Victor Hale same as everyone else. We call him, he write report disappears. Nothing happens except we waste time and look weak. Then what do? We clean up, we work harder. We show them that broken baskets and stolen money not enough to break us. Mrs. Chen started picking up trampled clothing, her movements sharp with rage. This what they want. Us crying, us defeated, us ready to give up. We give them opposite. We give them unsuitable women who too stubborn to quit. They worked through the morning, salvaging what they could, rewashing everything that had been dirtied. The other workers arrived, the Irish washerwomen, the Mexican seamstress, and didn't ask questions, just rolled up their sleeves and joined the cleanup. By noon, the laundry looked almost normal, though the red paint on the back wall remained, a reminder of what they were up against. Caleb arrived just after lunch, his face dark with anger. I heard. Half the town's heard. People are talking about how the unsuitable teacher's bad luck is spreading to everyone around her. He looked at the paint-stained wall. Eliza, this is escalating. First vandalism, now breaking and entering. Theft. Next time we'll deal with it like we dealt with this time. By pretending it didn't happen? By refusing to let it stop us. She faced him. Don't you see? If we run now, we prove them right. We prove that fear works, that intimidation wins, that unsuitable women should know their place, and every other unsuitable person in this town learns the same lesson. Obey or suffer. And if someone gets hurt, if they escalate from property damage to actual violence, then we deal with that when it happens. But I won't live my life in fear of what might happen. I did that for too long already. Caleb was silent for a moment, studying her face like he was seeing something new. You really won't back down, will you? Would you respect me if I did? No, but I'd sleep better knowing you were safe. Safe and silent? Or unsafe and standing? She smiled, sad and certain. I know which one I choose. He left, but not before extracting a promise that she'd call for him if trouble came again. Eliza agreed, though they both knew she probably wouldn't. This was her fight, and she'd learned early that other people's courage had limits. Better to stand alone than drag others down with her. The week brought more customers leaving, more whispers, more paint on the door that she cleaned off each morning with methodical determination. But it also brought something unexpected. New customers. A young Irish woman arrived with a basket of laundry, her eyes defiant. My husband says I shouldn't come here, says you're trouble. but I figure any woman who scares men this much must be doing something right. An older Mexican couple brought their mending. Our daughter, she was in your class. She still talks about the teacher who said she could be anything. Even some Chinese families from the edges of town started bringing their business, drawn by Mrs. Chen's reputation and apparently unfazed by the controversy. The economics remained brutal, more left than arrived, and Mrs. Chen's savings dwindled. But something else was happening. A line was being drawn. People were choosing sides, and Eliza was discovering that unsuitable attracted, unsuitable like moths to flame. 2 months after she'd stayed on that train platform, Eliza stood in the laundry early one morning pressing a shirt with the precision that had become second nature when she heard voices outside. Angry voices, male voices, too many of them. She set down the iron and moved to the window. At least 20 men gathered in the street, some holding torches despite the early hour. Carson was there, along with his friends from the vandalism incidents. But now they had reinforcements, and the crowd's energy felt different, organized, purposeful, dangerous. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her. This not random drunk men. This is mob. Someone organized this. Victor Hale. Maybe not directly, but his influence, his money, his whispers. Mrs. Chen's hand found Eliza's. We cannot fight this many. Need to leave. Come back when they're gone. If we leave, they'll burn the building. Better building than us. No. Eliza's voice hardened. This is exactly what they want. To terrify us into running. To prove that unsuitable women can't hold ground when real pressure comes. I won't give them that victory. Eliza. But she was already moving to the door, her fear transmuting into something cold and bright and absolutely furious. She stepped outside into the gathering crowd's hostile attention. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on her, and the morning's chill had nothing on the ice in those stares. Carson stepped forward, emboldened by numbers. You were warned, teacher. Told to leave. You didn't listen. I heard you. I simply didn't care. Eliza descended the steps, putting herself at ground level with the mob. Dangerous, but necessary. Fear was contagious, and the moment she showed it, they'd descend like wolves. What do you want? Want you gone. You and your unsuitable ideas and your disrespect for how things are done here. How things are done here? You mean how you terrorize anyone who doesn't bow to your narrow, fearful view of the world? She raised her voice, making sure everyone could hear. I taught your children. I treated them with respect and dignity and the revolutionary notion that their worth wasn't determined by their parents' wealth or their family names. And you call that unsuitable? You call that dangerous? Then you're even more pathetic than I thought. The crowd rippled with anger. Someone threw a rock that shattered against the wall behind her. Eliza didn't flinch. Go ahead. Throw your rocks, paint your threats, burn your buildings. All you prove is that your power is so fragile, it can't survive one woman treating children like human beings. Carson moved closer, his face red with rage. You think you're brave? You're just stupid. Stupid and too proud to know when you've lost. Lost? I'm still standing. I'm still working. I'm still here. You've thrown everything at me for months, and I'm still here. Who's lost, Carson? Me? Or you, standing in the street with 20 men at your back because you're too terrified to face one unsuitable woman alone? You stupid! His hand shot out, grabbing her arm, and froze. From behind Eliza came the unmistakable sound of a hammer being pulled back on a revolver. She turned her head slightly and saw Mrs. Chen in the doorway, the cleaver exchanged for Doc Morrison's old pistol, her hand steady despite her age. Let her go, Mrs. Chen said in a voice that could have etched glass. Now! Carson's hand dropped. But the crowd didn't disperse. If anything, the tension ratcheted higher. This was the moment, Eliza realized. The moment where this became something neither side could walk back from. Then a horse cantered into the square, and Caleb Ward dismounted in one fluid motion, rifle in hand. Morning, gentlemen. His voice was mild, but the rifle wasn't. Looks like you're having a meeting. Anyone invite the lady's friends? This doesn't concern you, Ward. Seems to concern me quite directly, seeing as how you're threatening someone under my protection. Your protection? Carson laughed. 1 man against 20? You that stupid? No, but I'm that stubborn. Caleb's eyes swept the crowd. And I'm betting most of you aren't actually here to hurt anyone. You're here because someone suggested it. Someone paid you. Someone made you think this was about defending Red Hollow's values. But look at what you're doing. 20 men with torches threatening women who wash your clothes and run an honest business. That feel like defending values? Or does it feel like being someone else's weapon? The crowd shifted. Several men at the back looked uncomfortable. This wasn't how mobs worked. Mobs relied on anonymity, on shared guilt, on no one stopping to think too hard about what they were doing. Caleb was making them think. "She's unsuitable," someone shouted from the safety of the middle of the crowd. "Teaches things she shouldn't, ideas that corrupt." "She taught my daughter to read medical texts." Caleb's voice cut through the protest. "Taught her that being poor and female wasn't a reason to give up on dreams. You call that corruption? I call that the only decent education Sarah's ever received." "Ward, you're making a mistake," Carson warned. "Victor Hale can speak for himself if he has concerns, but I notice he's not here. Sent you to do his dirty work instead. Does that seem like leadership, or does that seem like cowardice?" The name had been spoken. Victor Hale. The ghost behind every whisper, every threat, every carefully orchestrated campaign to break Eliza's spirit. And now it hung in the morning air, naked and undeniable. Several more men at the back started to drift away. Then a few more. The mob was dissolving, its purpose exposed, its courage evaporating in daylight and scrutiny. Carson stood his ground, but his supporters were melting like snow in spring. "This isn't over." "No," Eliza agreed. "It's not. But it's also not ending the way you planned. So go back to whoever organized this little performance and tell them that unsuitable women don't scare easily. And we don't fight alone." The remaining men departed, leaving threats and curses, but no violence. By the time the street cleared, Eliza's legs were shaking so hard she had to grip the porch railing to stay upright. Caleb lowered his rifle. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen." "Thank you, I think." "Definitely not a compliment. You faced down a mob, alone, without backup, without a plan, with nothing but sharp words and absolute certainty they wouldn't actually hurt you." He shook his head. "What if you'd been wrong?" "Then I'd have been wrong. But I wasn't." This time, Mrs. Chen emerged fully from the doorway, lowering Doc Morrison's ancient pistol. "She right, though. We show fear, they win. We show strength, they scatter like chickens. Now they know. Unsuitable women have teeth. They also know we're not backing down," Eliza added. "Which means next time, they'll come with more than paint and rocks. Then next time, we'll deal with next time." Caleb moved closer, his expression troubled. "But Eliza, you need to understand what just happened. Hale played his hand. He sent a mob. It failed. That means he's going to escalate. Men like him don't accept failure. They just get more creative about achieving their goals. Let him escalate. I'm not running." "I know. That's what terrifies me." The day passed in tense normalcy. Work resumed. Customers arrived, some looking nervous, others determined. The red paint on the wall stayed, a badge of honor now instead of shame. But that evening, as Eliza prepared to close up for the night, a boy arrived with a message. Not one of the town's children, one of the ranch kids from beyond the limits, dirty and scared and insistent. "From Mr. Hale," he said, thrusting the envelope at her and running before she could respond. Inside, crisp paper, expensive stationery, elegant handwriting. "Miss Hartwell, I had hoped you would see reason. Your stubbornness has instead brought chaos to a peaceful community. Tomorrow evening, the town council meets to discuss the disturbances at Chen's Laundry. I expect they will conclude that businesses attracting such trouble are unsuitable for residential areas. You have one chance to prevent Mrs. Chen from losing everything. Leave Red Hollow by week's end. I will personally ensure safe passage and positive references for teaching positions elsewhere. Continue your current path, and Mrs. Chen's business will be condemned, her property seized for public safety. The choice, as always, is yours. Victor Hale." Eliza read it twice, her hand steady, her mind calculating. This was the real threat. Not violence against her, but destruction of everything Mrs. Chen had built. 40 years of work, erased because she'd given shelter to an unsuitable woman. She climbed the stairs to Mrs. Chen's private rooms and handed over the letter without comment. The old woman read it once, then set it carefully on her table. "So, he shows his real weapon. I'll leave, tonight if necessary. I won't let him destroy you because of me. You leave, he still destroys me. Just slower. Just makes example of us both. You driven out, me punished for helping you. Either way, message sent. Unsuitable women cannot win. Then what do we do? Mrs. Chen stood, moved to her window, looked out at the town that had been her home for 3 decades. We do what unsuitable women always do. We fight smarter. We find leverage. We make him regret ever starting this war. How? He has power, money, influence, and we have truth. We have witnesses. We have people he hurt, people he threatened, people who hate him but too scared to speak. Mrs. Chen turned, and her eyes held a fierce light. Time to make them less scared of him than they are angry at him. That's asking people to risk everything. Yes, but maybe they ready. Maybe they just waiting for someone to start fire. You be that spark, Eliza. You already burning bright. Now we make sure whole town catches flame. Eliza looked at this woman who'd given her shelter, who'd stood with a pistol against a mob, who was now planning to wage war against the most powerful man in Red Hollow with nothing but courage and spite. Mrs. Chen, if we do this, if we really fight him, there's no going back. He'll destroy us both. Maybe, or maybe we destroy him first. She smiled, and it was absolutely savage. I spend 30 years being quiet, invisible, safe, unsuitable woman. I tired of safe. Rather be dangerous. Then we fight. Then we fight. The plan took shape over the next 3 days like a storm gathering on the horizon, slow, inevitable, and crackling with electricity that made the air taste like copper. Mrs. Chen's network proved deeper than Eliza had imagined. 40 years in Red Hollow had woven connections through every layer of society that polite folks pretended didn't exist. The washerwomen knew whose husbands gambled away their wages. The seamstress heard confessions whispered during fittings. The delivery boys saw who visited whose houses after dark. And Mrs. Chen, quiet and invisible in her unsuitable corner of town, had collected every secret like coins in a jar, never spending them, but always knowing their value. Now she was ready to spend them all. Tommy Martinez, she said, spreading papers across the laundry's back table after hours. The Irish washerwomen gathered close, along with the seamstress, Doc Morrison, who'd appeared with his medical bag and a grim expression, and Caleb, who'd insisted on being present despite Eliza's protests. His father, Miguel, he worked in Hale's mine. Got hurt 6 months ago. Cave-in broke his back. Hale's foreman said accident was Miguel's fault, refused compensation. Miguel, he still cannot walk right. I remember, Doc Morrison said quietly. I treated him. The cave-in happened because Hale cut costs on support timbers. I documented everything. But you never testified. No one asked me to testify. And Miguel was too scared to push. Hale owns the only mine within 50 miles. Speaking up meant blacklisting, meant his whole family starving. What if Miguel not alone? Mrs. Chen pulled out another paper. What if 6 other miners, all hurt in Hale's mine, all denied compensation, all told to stay quiet or lose everything? What if they all speak together? Caleb leaned forward. You're talking about building a case, actual legal action against Hale. I'm talking about showing this town what he really is. Not powerful businessman, not generous employer, but man who hurts people and pays them to stay silent about being hurt. That's dangerous, one of the washerwomen said, her Irish accent thick with worry. My husband, he works at Hale's lumber mill. If we speak against him, then we all speak together. Too many voices to silence. Mrs. Chen's eyes swept the group. This how he wins. Makes each person think they alone, they weak, they cannot fight. But we not alone. We unsuitable army. An unsuitable army very hard to crush. Eliza had been quiet, listening, her mind racing through implications and dangers and possibilities. Now she spoke. We need more than injured workers. We need to show pattern, systematic abuse of power, and we need it public, undeniable, impossible to dismiss as grudges from unsuitable malcontents. The town council meeting, Caleb said. Tomorrow night, Hale plans to condemn this building, push you out legally. What if instead of defending, we attack? Attack how? Present evidence. Call witnesses. Force the council to acknowledge what Hale's been doing while they look the other way. He met Eliza's eyes. Make them choose publicly, side with him or side with the people he's been hurting. The council's in his pocket, Doc Morrison said. 3 of the 5 members owe him money or favors. They won't turn on him. Maybe not all of them. But what about the town watching? What about the people who sit in that room and hear testimony about crushed backs and stolen wages and businesses destroyed for refusing to submit? Eliza's voice grew stronger. We're not trying to win the council's vote. We're trying to win the town's conscience. If they have one, the seamstress muttered. They do. I've seen it. In the customers who still come here despite the threats. In the families who treat their children like they matter, regardless of background. And people like you who show up to this meeting knowing it's dangerous. Eliza stood, her conviction solid as bedrock. Fear's been winning because it's been the loudest voice. We just need to be louder. Mrs. Chen smiled, sharp and satisfied. Good. Then tomorrow we make very loud noise. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Eliza worked mechanically, pressing shirts and folding linens while her mind rehearsed arguments, anticipated objections, planned for the dozen ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The town council met in the schoolhouse. Bitter irony that. And sessions were public but rarely attended. Tomorrow night's meeting about the unsuitable business had been advertised as a matter of public safety. Eliza suspected Hale wanted an audience for her humiliation. He was about to get an audience for something else entirely. By evening, her nerves were stretched so tight she could barely eat the dinner Mrs. Chen prepared. The old woman watched her push rice around her bowl with knowing eyes. You scared. Terrified. Good. Means you understand stakes. Mrs. Chen set down her chopsticks. I tell you story. When I first come here, I so scared all the time. Scared of language I not speak. Scared of people who hate me for having wrong face. Scared I cannot feed my daughter. Cannot survive. Cannot make life in this hard place. What changed? Nothing changed. I still scared, but I learned something important. Being scared and being brave, not opposites. They partners, brave people not the ones who feel no fear. They the ones who feel fear and do thing anyway. She reached across the table, gripped Eliza's hand with calloused fingers. You feel fear right now. Good. Means you human, but you do thing anyway. That make you brave. Or stupid. Often same thing. A knock at the door interrupted them. Caleb entered, dressed in his Sunday clothes, his face set in grim determination. Behind him came Doc Morrison, Miguel Martinez leaning on his wife's arm, and a steady stream of others, miners with scarred hands and bent backs, women whose husbands had died in Hale's operations, shop owners who'd been driven out of business by his ruthless tactics. At least 20 people crowded into the laundry's back room, unsuitable souls gathering for war. Everyone here understands the risk? Eliza asked, her voice cutting through the nervous murmurs. If we do this, Hale will retaliate. There's no protection I can offer, no guarantee of safety. He owns too much, controls too many pieces of this town. Speaking against him tonight might cost you everything. Already cost us everything, Miguel said quietly, his Spanish accent making the words musical despite their bitterness. My back broken, my family hungry, my son, he watched his father become crippled because boss too cheap to buy good timber. What else I got to lose? My silence? He can keep it. I want my dignity back. My husband died in the mine, a young woman added, her baby balanced on her hip. Hale sent flowers to the funeral. Pretty flowers, expensive. You know what he not send? The 3 months' wages he owed. Not even enough for a headstone. So no, Miss Hartwell, I'm not scared of him anymore. I just angry. One by one they spoke. Stories of crushed bodies and crushed spirits, of wages stolen and safety ignored, of a town built on the broken backs of people nobody saw. And through it all, Victor Hale's shadow, always at a distance, always with clean hands, always protected by money and influence while others bled. Then we speak, Eliza said, and we speak truth so loud they can't ignore it. The schoolhouse blazed with lamplight when they arrived, drawing people like moths to flame. The council had set up at the teacher's desk, Eliza's old desk, she noted with a bitter twist, while rows of benches filled with curious townfolk eager for the spectacle of the unsuitable teacher's final defeat. Victor Hale sat in the front row, impeccably dressed, a slight smile playing at his lips. He nodded to Eliza as she entered, the gesture magnanimous, as if he'd already won and could afford to be gracious. She nodded back and thought, "Enjoy your confidence while it lasts." The council chairman, a portly banker named Whitmore, who owed Hale for a business loan, called the meeting to order with pompous self-importance. "We're here to address the ongoing disturbances at Chen's Laundry and Alterations. Recent incidents of vandalism, theft, and public disorder have made it clear that this establishment has become a focal point for unsuitable elements and a danger to community peace." "Define unsuitable," Eliza said from her seat, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Whitmore blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "You used the word unsuitable. I'd like you to define it. What makes a person or a business unsuitable?" She stood, and every eye in the room tracked her movement. Is it treating people with equal respect regardless of their background? Is it refusing to bow to intimidation? Or is it simply existing in a way that makes powerful men uncomfortable? "Miss Hartwell, you'll have an opportunity to speak." "Will I?" Because this meeting was called to condemn a business for attracting violence, as if the business itself is responsible rather than the men who commit the violence. That seems like blaming the victim, Mr. Whitmore. Surely the council wouldn't engage in such obvious injustice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hale's smile thinned slightly. Whitmore's face reddened. "The council has received numerous complaints about disturbances." "From whom?" Caleb stood now, his presence commanding attention. "I'd like to hear from these concerned citizens. Let them stand and voice their complaints publicly so we can all understand the nature of the problem." Silence. No one stood. The people who'd vandalized the laundry, who'd formed the mob, who'd whispered and spread fear, none of them wanted to claim their actions in the light. "That's what I thought," Caleb said. "Seems like the only people disturbed are the ones trying to drive an honest business out of town for daring to employ someone they don't like." "This is irregular," Whitmore started. "What's irregular?" Doc Morrison interrupted, standing with his medical bag in hand, "is that we're discussing property disputes when there are serious allegations of criminal negligence that this council has ignored for years." The room went very quiet. Hale's smile vanished completely. "Dr. Morrison, this meeting is not about... It's about unsuitable behavior, isn't it?" Doc Morrison's voice, usually gentle, now cut like a scalpel. "About people who endanger the community? Then let's discuss actual danger. 6 miners injured in the past year alone due to inadequate safety measures at Hale's mine. I have medical documentation for each case. Crushed limbs. Broken backs. One man lost his hearing from an explosion that wouldn't have happened if the blasting protocols were followed. And in every case, the injured were blamed, denied compensation, and threatened with blacklisting if they spoke up." "That's slander!" Hull stood, his composure cracking. "Those were accidents. Tragic, but accidents. And I've always provided..." "Provided what?" Miguel Martinez rose, leaning heavily on his cane. "Provided lies. Provided threats. You tell me my broken back my own fault. You tell me I careless. I not follow safety rules. But I worked that mine 15 years. 15 years, no problems. Then you cut costs on support beams and ceiling collapses on 3 men. 3 men, Mr. Hale. And you blame us for your greed." The room erupted, people shouting questions, demanding answers, the careful facade of order dissolving into chaos. Whitmore banged his gavel desperately, but the sound was drowned out by voices that had been silent too long. Eliza caught Hale's eye across the tumult. For the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation in his face. She saw fear. "Order!" Whitmore finally made himself heard. "This is not the time or place." "When is the time?" a woman called from the back. "When is the place? My husband died in that mine, and you sent me a sympathy card." "A card? While I figured out how to feed 3 children on nothing because Hale kept his wages." "I lost my shop because I wouldn't sell to Hale at half its value," another voice added. "Suddenly the bank called my loan, the suppliers refused to deliver, and customers got warned away. All coincidence, I'm sure. My daughter was told she couldn't attend school anymore because we were unsuitable. And we were unsuitable because we spoke Chinese at home." The dam had broken. Every grievance, every buried resentment, every silenced voice found volume. And at the center of it all sat Victor Hale, his empire of fear crumbling as people discovered strength in numbers. Eliza raised her hand, and somehow, impossibly, the room quieted to hear her. "Gentlemen of the council," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You called this meeting to discuss unsuitable elements in our community. You were right to do so. It does have an unsuitable element. It has a man who built his fortune on the suffering of others, who crushes anyone who challenges him, who uses fear and intimidation as business tactics, and who has convinced this town that people like Mrs. Chen, like me, like every person who just spoke, we're the problem. We're unsuitable. We're dangerous." She walked toward the council table and people parted to let her through. But here's what I've learned in my months here. Unsuitable is just another word for inconvenient. Inconvenient to power, inconvenient to corruption, inconvenient to men who've built kingdoms on other people's silence. She turned to face the crowd. "Mrs. Chen is unsuitable because she gave me a job when I had nothing. Doc Morrison is unsuitable because he documented injuries instead of looking away. These miners are unsuitable because they survived and dared to speak about it. And I'm unsuitable because I taught children that their worth wasn't determined by their birth." "Miss Hartwell," Whitmore tried to interrupt. "If that's unsuitable, then I'm proud to be unsuitable. And I think this town needs to decide. Do you want to be suitable to Victor Hale's vision of order? Or do you want to be unsuitable enough to demand better?" Hale stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "This is absurd. A circus. I came here expecting a professional discussion about public safety, not wild accusations from disgruntled former employees and former employees you injured and discarded," Caleb cut in. "People whose lives you destroyed because they couldn't afford to fight back. People who are lying for attention or for money or because they've been manipulated by," Hale gestured at Eliza, "by a woman with an agenda. A disgraced teacher who can't accept that she failed, so she's trying to drag down successful men to her level. Is that what you think this is?" Eliza's voice was dangerously quiet. "You think I'm doing this because I'm bitter about losing my position? I think you're doing this because you're unsuitable for any position. You always have been. Too proud, too radical, too convinced of your own righteousness to understand how the world actually works." "And how does the world work, Mr. Hale? Through fear? Through crushing anyone who doesn't bow? Through building empires on broken bodies and stolen wages? Through strength? Through understanding that civilization requires order, hierarchy, people knowing their place?" His composure was completely gone now, his face flushed with rage. "You want to destroy that? You want chaos where anyone can question authority, where unsuitable women can teach unsuitable ideas to children who should learn obedience?" The room had gone dead silent. Even Whitmore sat frozen, his gavel limp in his hand. "You want to talk about my mine?" Hale continued, his voice rising. "Fine. It's dangerous work. People get hurt. That's the nature of mining. But I provide jobs, I support this town, I built half the buildings on Main Street. And you want to condemn me because a few careless workers? My father wasn't careless." The voice came from the doorway. Young, shaking with emotion but clear. Tommy Martinez, all of 12 years old, stood in the entrance. His mother tried to pull him back, but he shook her off and walked into the room with his shoulders back and his chin up. "Tommy, no," Miguel started. "My father wasn't careless," Tommy repeated, louder now. "He was the best miner you had. Everyone said so. But you used bad timber because it was cheaper, and the roof collapsed, and now he can't work, can't even walk without pain. And you told him it was his fault. You looked him in the eye and called him careless and stupid and blamed him for getting hurt by your greed. Boy, you don't understand business. I understand you took my father's body and broke it and then threw him away like trash. I understand my mother cries at night because we don't have enough food. I understand my little sister doesn't know why Papa can't play with her anymore." Tommy's voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "And I understand that you're not strong or successful. You're just mean, and everyone's been too scared to say it." For a long moment, no one moved. A child had just called the most powerful man in Red Hollow mean, and the simple truth of it hung in the air like smoke. Then Hale laughed, a cold sound that raised the hair on Eliza's neck. "This is what you've come to? Using children for sympathy? Teaching them to disrespect authority? To blame their betters for their problems?" He turned to the council. "I've heard enough. This meeting has become exactly what I warned you about. unsuitable elements disrupting order and spreading discontent. I move that we condemn Chen's laundry immediately. And no. Councilman Harrison, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. He was older than the others, a former sheriff who'd retired to the council when his knees gave out. No, I don't think we'll be condemning anything tonight. Whitmore stared at him. Harrison, we agreed. You agreed. After Hale bought you dinner and reminded you of that loan, but I didn't agree to be part of this farce. Harrison stood, his joints creaking. I've watched this town for 40 years. Watched it grow, watched it change. And I've watched Victor Hale build his empire piece by piece, always just on the right side of legal, always with clean hands because he pays other people to get dirty. I told myself it wasn't my business, that successful men deserve some latitude, that maybe those miners really were careless, those shop owners really did fail on their own. He looked at Tommy, still standing defiant in the center of the room. But I can't tell myself that anymore. Not when children are calling us out for cowardice. Not when the unsuitable teacher has more courage than the whole damn council combined. Harrison turned to Hale. So no, we're not condemning Chen's laundry. We're opening an investigation into safety practices at your mine, and your lumber mill, and your other operations. And we're going to hear testimony from every person you've hurt and dismissed and threatened into silence. You can't. Hale's voice was strangled. I can. I just did. And unless you want me to start asking questions about some of your other business practices, the ones that might be of interest to federal authorities, I suggest you sit down and shut up. Hale stood frozen, his face a mask of fury and shock. Then he turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the silent room. No one spoke for a long moment. Then someone in the back started clapping. Others joined. Soon the whole room was applauding, people standing, some crying, all of them celebrating the impossible thing they'd just witnessed. A tyrant, walking away defeated. Outside, the night air tasted like freedom. Eliza stood on the schoolhouse steps, watching people stream past, many stopping to thank her, to thank Mrs. Chen, to thank Tommy for his courage. The boy stood with his parents, his mother's arms around him, his father's hand on his shoulder despite the pain the movement caused. Caleb found her in the darkness. You did it. We did it. All of us. Together. He'll come back. You know that, right? Men like Hale don't accept defeat. They just get more dangerous. I know. Eliza watched Hale's carriage disappear into the night. But tonight, he lost. And everyone saw it. That changes things. Changes or starts a war? Maybe both. Mrs. Chen appeared, her face serene despite the evening's chaos. We go home now. Tomorrow, real work begins. What real work? Eliza asked. We just exposed him in front of the whole town. Exposed, yes. Defeated? No. Mrs. Chen started walking. Exposed man like cornered animal, very dangerous. Next move his, and he make it count. We need be ready. She was right, Eliza knew. Tonight was a victory, but victories were just moments. The war would continue, and Hale had resources they couldn't imagine, connections that ran deeper than one town council meeting. But for tonight, walking through Red Hollow's streets with people who no longer looked away, who nodded and smiled and treated her like she belonged, Eliza let herself feel the win. 3 days later, the schoolhouse burned. Eliza woke to bells clanging the alarm, to people shouting, to the acrid smell of smoke carried on the wind. She threw on clothes and ran outside to find half the town gathered in the street, watching flames consume the building where she'd taught, where she'd loved her work, where last week they'd stood up to Victor Hale. The fire brigade worked frantically, but the building was old, the wood dry, and by the time they got the flames under control, only charred walls remained. Sheriff Dawson, Hale's man through and through, stood taking statements with a notebook and a bored expression. When he saw Eliza, something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or satisfaction. Miss Hartwell, funny you should be here. Half the town is here, Sheriff. Fire draws crowds. True. But you've got special history with this building, don't you? Fired from your teaching position. Publicly humiliated. Might hold a grudge. Ice slid down her spine. You think I did this? I think someone did. And I think the timing's interesting. Right after you made a big scene at the council meeting, right after you stirred up trouble against Mr. Hale. Now the schoolhouse burns down, and you're one of the first people on scene. I'm one of the first people on scene because I live 2 streets away and woke up to alarm bells. Convenient story. Caleb pushed through the crowd, his face dark with anger. Dawson, you can't seriously be suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. Yet. Just noting facts. The sheriff closed his notebook. But I'll be investigating thoroughly, and Miss Hartwell would be wise to stay available for questioning. He walked away, leaving Eliza standing in the street with the smoking ruins behind her and understanding settling like lead in her stomach. He's going to blame me, she whispered. Hale's going to blame me for this. Of course he is. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, soot-stained and grim. Make you arsonist, destroy your credibility, turn victory into defeat. Clean, simple, exactly his style. But I would never, truth not matter. Only what people believe matters. Mrs. Chen gripped her arm. And after you speak against him so publicly, after you make him look weak, many people ready to believe unsuitable teacher might burn down school in revenge. We need to prove I didn't do it, Caleb said. Find out who really did, show it was Hale's work. Prove what? That man who owns sheriff also owns investigation? Mrs. Chen shook her head. This different fight, this not about truth, this about survival. By morning, the whispers had started. Eliza heard them when she walked to the laundry, felt them in the stares that followed her movement. The unsuitable teacher who'd caused so much trouble had finally gone too far, burned down the school out of spite. Some people claimed they'd seen her near the building that night. Others said she'd always been unstable, that her radical ideas had led inevitably to violence. The narrative was building brick by brick, lie by lie. And Victor Hale sat in his office, she imagined, watching his counterattack unfold with satisfaction. That afternoon, Sheriff Dawson arrived at the laundry with 2 deputies and a warrant. Eliza Hartwell, you're under arrest for arson and destruction of public property. This is insane, Caleb stepped between them. She didn't do anything. Warrant says otherwise. We've got witness testimony placing her near the schoolhouse around the time the fire started. We've got motive. She was fired from that school, made her anger very public. And we've got opportunity. Dawson's smile was thin and cruel. Seems pretty clear to me. Who's your witness? Eliza asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Who claims to have seen me? That's part of the investigation. You'll find out at trial. Trial? Mrs. Chen's face went white. You arrest her on word of secret witness? This not justice. This is the law, ma'am, and the law says I've got probable cause. Dawson nodded to his deputies. Take her. Rough hands grabbed Eliza's arms. She didn't resist. Fighting would only make things worse, give them more ammunition. But as they led her toward the door, she looked back at Mrs. Chen, at Caleb, at the life she'd built from ruins. Don't stop fighting, she said. Don't let him win. We won't, Caleb promised, his voice raw. We'll get you out. We'll prove your innocence, whatever it takes. The jail was small, just 2 cells in the back of the sheriff's office. They locked her in the larger one, and Dawson stood outside the bars with his arms crossed. Must be hard, he said conversationally, falling so far so fast, from respected teacher to unemployed laborer to accused arsonist, all because you couldn't learn to keep your mouth shut. All because I refused to let a tyrant crush people without consequence. Tyrant, he laughed. Victor Hale built this town. He employs half the people in it, and you think standing up to him makes you a hero? It makes you a fool. Then I'm a fool with a clear conscience. Conscience won't keep you warm in territorial prison, and that's where you're headed, Miss Hartwell. Unless you wise up, apologize publicly, admit what you did, and leave Red Hollow forever. Mr. Hale's a generous man. He might even drop the charges if you cooperate. There it was, the real offer. Confess to a crime she didn't commit, destroy her own credibility, and skulk away in disgrace. Let Hale win completely. Let him prove that unsuitable women could be broken, and maybe she'd avoid prison. Tell Mr. Hale, Eliza said carefully, that he can go to hell. Dawson shrugged. Your funeral, or your trial, anyway. Same difference. He left her alone in the cell, and for the first time since she'd stayed on that train platform, Eliza felt truly trapped. The walls pressed close. The bars were solid iron. Outside, Victor Hale was spinning his web tighter, and she couldn't fight back from inside a cage. But giving up wasn't an option. Not now. Not after everything they'd built. Everyone who'd found courage through her example. Somewhere out there, Mrs. Chen was planning. Caleb was searching for evidence. Tommy Martinez and his father, and all the others who'd spoken up, were watching to see if unsuitable people could really win against power. Eliza sat on the narrow cot and forced herself to breathe, to think, to plot. This wasn't over. Hale had won this round, but the fight continued. And she'd learned something important in these past months. Unsuitable women were harder to break than anyone expected. Even behind bars, she was still dangerous. The cell smelled like old sweat and despair, and Eliza spent the first night cataloging every crack in the ceiling, every sound from the street, every possible way this could end badly. By dawn, she'd counted 247 cracks, heard 17 separate conversations through the thin walls, and imagined at least 30 different scenarios where Victor Hale emerged victorious while she rotted in territorial prison. Then she stopped counting and started planning. The guard brought breakfast around 7, watery coffee and stale bread that tasted like sawdust. He was young, maybe 20, with nervous eyes that wouldn't quite meet hers. "You don't believe I did it, do you?" Eliza asked quietly. The guard flinched. "Ain't my job to believe or not believe, just to keep you locked up until trial." "What's your name?" "Don't see how that matters." "It matters because I'd like to know the name of the person guarding an innocent woman. Seems only fair." He hesitated, then muttered, Thomas Brennan. "Irish family?" "My da came over during the famine, worked himself to death in Hale's lumber mill." But the bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. "So yeah, Irish." Eliza filed that information away carefully. "I taught Irish children in my classroom, Thomas. Treated them the same as everyone else. That's part of why I'm unsuitable." "I heard." He glanced toward the door, checking they were alone. "I also heard what you did at that council meeting. Heard you stood up to Hale when nobody else would. And now he's made sure I can't stand up to anyone from behind bars." Thomas said nothing, but something flickered in his expression, doubt, perhaps, or the beginning of it. He collected the breakfast tray and left without another word, but Eliza felt the first crack forming in Hale's perfect trap. Caleb arrived an hour later, escorted by Thomas, and looking like he hadn't slept in days. The guard gave them privacy, though he stayed close enough to intervene if needed. "Tell me you have good news," Eliza said. "I wish I could." Caleb gripped the bars, his knuckles white. "The witness is Margaret Pemberton, the banker's wife. She claims she saw you near the schoolhouse around midnight, carrying what looked like a lantern and a can of kerosene." "That's a lie. I was in my room all night. Mrs. Chen can vouch for me." "Mrs. Chen's testimony won't count for much. Hale's already spreading rumors that she'd lie to protect you, that the whole unsuitable faction would say anything to avoid consequences. There has to be something. Some way to prove I wasn't there, some evidence that contradicts her story. We're looking. Doc Morrison's examining the fire patterns to determine where it started. Harrison's pressuring the council for an independent investigation. Even some of the miners are asking questions, making noise about justice. Caleb's voice dropped. "But Eliza, it might not be enough. Hale owns the judge who'll hear your case. He owns the prosecutor. The trial's already decided before it starts. Then we change the game." Eliza moved closer to the bars. "We stop trying to prove my innocence in a system designed to find me guilty, and we prove Hale's guilt so thoroughly that even his bought judge can't ignore it." "How?" "He's covered his tracks. There's no evidence linking him to the fire." "Not the fire. But there's evidence linking him to everything else. The mine accidents, the wage theft, the intimidation. We made him bleed at that council meeting. We just need to make him bleed harder." "From inside a jail cell?" "I'm not the only one who can fight. Mrs. Chen, you, Doc Morrison, all those people who spoke up, they're still out there, still unsuitable, still angry." She met his eyes. "Use that. Build on what we started. Make so much noise that Hale's forced to respond, and when he responds, he'll make mistakes. Or he'll crush everyone who stands against him. Maybe. But we're already being crushed. At least this way we go down fighting." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was memorizing it. "You know there's another option. If we could get you out of here, get you to the territorial capital before the trial, Run, you mean. Escape and prove Hale right about everything. Survive, I mean. Live to fight another day instead of martyring yourself in a rigged trial. And what happens to everyone else? To Mrs. Chen when they condemn her business? To those miners when Hale blacklists them permanently? To Sarah when she learns that standing up for what's right means running away when it gets hard? Eliza shook her head. I stayed on that train platform because leaving meant letting fear win. I'm not leaving now for the same reason. Even if staying means prison? Even then. He reached through the bars and she took his hand, feeling the calluses from ranch work, the strength in his grip, the connection that had formed between two stubborn souls who refused to bend. Mary would have liked you, he said quietly. She would have said you're too brave for your own good and probably going to get yourself killed, but she would have liked you anyway. I wish I could have met her. She would have joined your unsuitable army in a heartbeat, probably would have led the charge. His smile was sad and warm at once. I'll do what you're asking. Build the noise. Make him bleed. But Eliza, if it comes down to you or him, if there's a choice between saving you and destroying him, I'm choosing you. Every time. That's not your choice to make. Watch me. After he left, Eliza paced the small cell, her mind racing through possibilities and problems and the narrowing paths to victory. The trial was set for 5 days out, barely enough time to mount a defense, which was exactly Hale's intent. Rush to judgment, no time for contradictory evidence to surface, just a quick conviction and a long sentence. Unless they could force a delay. Unless they could create enough chaos, enough doubt, enough pressure that the system couldn't simply railroad her toward prison. That evening, Mrs. Chen came with dinner she'd cooked herself. Real food, not prison slop. Thomas led her through without question, and Eliza suspected the young guard was further from Hale's influence than he appeared. You look terrible, Mrs. Chen announced, setting out containers of rice, vegetables, and perfectly roasted chicken. Not sleeping, not eating enough. Cannot fight from weakness. Hard to sleep when you're facing 20 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit. So commit different crime. Better crime. Crime worth 20 years. Mrs. Chen's eyes gleamed with dark humor. If going to prison anyway, might as well earn it. Despite everything, Eliza almost laughed. What did you have in mind? I have mine full of ideas, some good, some terrible. Some probably get us both killed. She lowered her voice. But first, I tell you what I learn. Margaret Pemberton, she says she see you near schoolhouse at midnight, but Margaret Pemberton not leave her house after dark. Never. Everyone know this. She afraid of night, afraid of shadows, afraid of everything. Her own husband joke about it. Then she's lying. Of course lying. Question is why? What Hale give her to lie? Or what he threaten her with if she not lie? We need to find out. If we can prove she's lying, the whole case falls apart. Already working on it. Caleb, he talked to banker friends in other towns. Doc Morrison, he asked questions about Pemberton family health, look for leverage. Harrison, he digged through old council records for anything suspicious. Mrs. Chen smiled grimly. Unsuitable army mobilizing. We just need more time. I have 5 days until trial. Then we delay trial. Make them postpone. Give unsuitable army time to work. How do we delay a trial when the judge is in Hale's pocket? Mrs. Chen's smile widened. We make Hale too busy putting out fires to attend trial. Cannot convict unsuitable woman if unsuitable man too distracted defending himself. Over the next 3 days, Red Hollow erupted into barely controlled chaos, and Eliza watched it unfold through Thomas's nervous reports and the shouting that drifted through the jail's thin walls. It started when Miguel Martinez filed a formal complaint with the territorial governor about safety violations at Hale's mine, backed by Doc Morrison's medical documentation and sworn statements from 15 injured workers. The governor's office sent an inspector, someone outside Hale's sphere of influence, who arrived unannounced and demanded full access to the mine's operations. Hale was forced to comply, which meant shutting down operations, which meant losing money and control. Then the Irish workers at the lumber mill went on strike, demanding back pay for overtime hours that had been conveniently forgotten in their wages. They picketed the mill's entrance, sang work songs loud enough to wake the dead, and refused to move even when Hale sent hired muscle to intimidate them. The hired muscle backed down when 50 more unsuitable souls showed up to stand with the strikers. Then someone leaked documents to the territorial newspaper, records showing that Hale had been systematically underreporting his mine's output to avoid taxes, pocketing the difference while the territory lost revenue. The newspaper ran the story with blazing headlines, and suddenly Hale was facing federal scrutiny on top of everything else. "It's falling apart," Thomas said on the third day, bringing Eliza her dinner with something almost like admiration in his voice. "Hale's scrambling to contain everything. The trial's been postponed twice already. Once because the prosecutor's busy with the tax investigation, once because Hale himself can't attend due to the governor's inspector demanding his presence at the mine." "Who leaked the tax documents?" Eliza asked. "Nobody knows. Just appeared on the newspaper editor's desk one morning with a note saying unsuitable regards." Thomas grinned. "Half the town's trying to figure out who's behind it all. The other half's too busy enjoying watching Hale squirm." That night, Mrs. Chen visited again, and her satisfaction was palpable. Fire number 1, lit. Fire number 2, burning nicely. Fire number 3, spreading faster than he can control. She unpacked dinner with efficient movements. He tried to put out tax investigation. Strikers get angrier. He tried to break strike. Governor's inspector asked more questions. He tried to satisfy inspector. Newspaper run another story about his business practices. Beautiful chaos. "Where did you get those tax documents?" "Better you not know." But let's say Hale, not only powerful man with connections. Some of us unsuitable people, we know people too. People who work in his office, clean his buildings, see papers he think invisible people cannot read. "You're magnificent," Eliza said sincerely. "I'm angry. Anger makes people creative." Mrs. Chen's expression sobered. "But this only buying time. Eventually he put out fires. Eventually he come after you again. We need more than chaos. We need proof of who really burned Schoolhouse. Do we have any leads?" "Maybe." "Thomas, he tell Caleb something interesting. Night of fire. Thomas on duty here at jail. Around 11:30, he see 2 men leave sheriff's office, head toward Schoolhouse. He not think much of it then, think maybe sheriff send deputies to check on something. But now he wonder. Did he recognize them? Too dark. But he remember they carry something. Satchels maybe, or bags. Heavy ones. Way they walked. Eliza's mind raced. If we could find those men, get them to talk. Big if. They probably Hale's men. Probably paid well to stay silent. Probably told that talking means worse than losing job. Mrs. Chen paused. Unless we find one who not so loyal, one who maybe have conscience, one who can be convinced that unsuitable army protects people who do right thing. You think someone who commits arson for Hale can be convinced to betray him? I think people do bad things for many reasons. Money, fear, family pressure. But everyone have breaking point. Everyone have price, and price not always money. Sometimes price is justice. Sometimes is revenge. Sometimes is just being tired of being afraid. The next morning brought visitors Eliza didn't expect. Margaret Pemberton, accompanied by her husband, both looking like they'd aged a decade in the past week. Thomas let them through, though his hand stayed near his sidearm. Eliza stood as they approached the cell, searching Margaret's face for clues about this unexpected development. Miss Hartwell, Margaret's voice trembled, I need to speak with you, privately. Her husband frowned. Margaret, we discussed this. I know what we discussed, Charles, but I can't. I can't do this anymore. She turned to Thomas. Please, just a few minutes. The 2 men withdrew to the far end of the room, giving the illusion of privacy, though both clearly strained to hear. Margaret moved closer to the bars, her hands twisting her handkerchief into knots. I lied. About seeing you that night. I wasn't near the schoolhouse. I was home in bed just like always. I never leave the house after dark. Everyone knows that. Then why did you say you saw me? Because Victor Hale came to our house the day after the fire. He was very polite, very understanding, said he knew it must be difficult, seeing someone so unsuitable causing trouble in town. Said he understood how loyal citizens might want to help restore order. Her voice broke. Then he mentioned my husband's loans, mentioned how unfortunate it would be if the bank called them in early, how we'd lose everything, the house, Charles's business, our entire future. And he suggested that if I could provide testimony about what I saw that night, Perhaps the bank could extend more favorable terms. He blackmailed you. He never said those words. He's too clever for that. He just painted the picture and let me connect the dots myself. Margaret's hands clenched the handkerchief so tight her knuckles went white. I told myself you were unsuitable anyway, that you'd caused all this trouble, so maybe you did burn the school. That it wasn't really lying if I was helping restore peace to the town. But you knew I didn't do it. I knew. And every day since I've felt it eating at me, knowing I was condemning an innocent woman to save my own comfort. Tears tracked down her face. Then I heard about the strikes, about the tax investigation, about all those people standing up to Hale despite the risk. And I thought about you, sitting in this cell, facing prison for something you didn't do because I was too cowardly to tell the truth. Eliza studied the woman who'd been about to destroy her future, seeing past the expensive dress and cultivated propriety to the fear underneath. Margaret Pemberton wasn't evil. She was just terrified. And terrified people made terrible choices. Why tell me now? Why not just recant at trial? Because if I wait until trial, Hale will know I'm going to betray him. He'll have time to prepare, to threaten Charles, to make sure we lose everything anyway. But if I tell the truth now, if I go public before he expects it, maybe we have a chance. Margaret's voice steadied. I'm not brave like you, Miss Hartwell, but I'm tired of letting fear make my choices. So I'm asking, if I recant my testimony, if I admit I lied, will you help protect my husband? He didn't know what I was doing. He shouldn't suffer for my cowardice. I can't promise anything, but I can promise that the unsuitable army looks after its own, and the moment you tell the truth, you become one of us. Unsuitable. Margaret tested the word, then smiled weakly. I suppose I can live with that. Charles, she called. Her husband hurried over. We're going to the sheriff's office. I need to make a new statement. Margaret, Hale will destroy us. He's going to destroy us anyway. At least this way we'll still be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. She turned back to Eliza. I'm sorry for everything. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but sorry is a start. Testimony is better. Go tell the truth, Mrs. Pemberton. Let the unsuitable army handle the rest. Within an hour, Red Hollow's rumor mill was working at full speed. Margaret Pemberton had recanted her testimony. The only witness against Eliza Hartwell had admitted to lying under pressure from Victor Hale. The case was falling apart. Sheriff Dawson appeared at the cell that afternoon, his face a thundercloud. You're being released. Judge's orders. Without witness testimony, there's no probable cause to hold you. He unlocked the cell with movements sharp with anger. But this isn't over. Hale's not going to let this go. I wouldn't expect him to. Eliza stepped out of the cell, her legs unsteady after days of confinement. Tell Mr. Hale I said thank you. His overreach just proved everything we've been saying about his methods. You think you've won? I think unsuitable people are harder to crush than he expected. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Mrs. Chen stood at the front, flanked by Caleb, Doc Morrison, Miguel Martinez, and dozens of others, the unsuitable army in full force. When Eliza emerged, they erupted into cheers. Speech! Someone called. Give us a speech! But Eliza was done with speeches. She walked directly to Mrs. Chen and pulled her into a fierce hug. Thank you for everything, for the fires, the chaos, the beautiful destruction. Welcome, Mrs. Chen's voice was muffled against her shoulder. But celebration later. Work now. We wounded him, but wounded animals most dangerous. Need finish this before he recover. How? We've exposed his intimidation, his tax fraud, his safety violations. What else is there? The fire. Caleb stepped forward. We still don't know who actually set it. Margaret's recantation proves you didn't, but it doesn't prove who did. Until we have that, Hale can claim it was random vandalism, deny any involvement, walk away from this whole mess with nothing but minor fines. Then we find who set the fire, Eliza's voice hardened, and we make them talk. Doc Morrison cleared his throat. There might be a way. I've been examining the burn patterns, like I said. The fire started in 3 separate locations, deliberate, professional arson. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, and I found something interesting in the debris, a fragment of a boot print preserved in ash near the accelerant source, distinctive sole pattern, like nothing made locally. Custom boots, Caleb said. Expensive, the kind someone would remember making. Oh, there's only one cobbler in the territory who does custom work like that. Old Finnish fellow in Cheyenne, about 2 days' ride from here. If we could get to him, show him the print, maybe he could tell us who ordered those boots. I'll go. Caleb's tone left no room for argument. Leave at dawn. Be back in 4 days if I push hard. 4 days without proof. Hale will have time to cover his tracks further, Mrs. Chen said. We need keep pressure on while Caleb's searching. Keep him distracted. Keep him defensive. The strike's still going, one of the mill workers spoke up. We can hold that line. Maybe expand it to his other operations. I can keep feeding stories to the newspaper, someone else added. I work in Hale's office, nowhere more bodies buried. And I can rally the council for emergency sessions on mine safety, Harrison said. Force him to answer questions publicly, on record. Eliza looked at the faces surrounding her, unsuitable people from every corner of Red Hollow, united by shared anger and desperate hope. This was what Hale had feared most. Not one stubborn teacher, not one defiant business owner, but a whole community realizing their power, discovering that fear lost its hold when people stood together. Then we keep fighting. We keep him so busy defending himself that he can't mount an effective offense, and when Caleb comes back with proof, we finish this. That night, Eliza returned to her room above the laundry and found it exactly as she'd left it, except for a new addition, a stack of letters on her small table. She opened them one by one, reading messages from people across Red Hollow. From the Irish washerwomen, thank you for showing us unsuitable is powerful. From a miner's widow, my husband would have been proud to see someone stand up. From Sarah, in careful handwriting, you're the bravest person I know. When I'm a doctor, I want to be brave like you. Eliza sat on her bed and let herself cry for the first time since her arrest. Not from despair, but from the overwhelming recognition that she wasn't fighting alone anymore. That unsuitable had become a badge of honor, that something was changing in Red Hollow, something bigger than one woman's battle against one powerful man. The next 4 days were a whirlwind of coordinated chaos. The strike expanded to include Hale's freight operation. The newspaper ran daily exposés about his business practices. The council held marathon sessions examining safety regulations. And through it all, Hale scrambled to contain the damage, his usually perfect composure cracking under pressure. Eliza coordinated from the laundry, which had become unsuitable headquarters. People came and went at all hours, sharing information, planning next moves, supporting each other through the fear that still haunted them despite their newfound courage. On the 4th evening, Caleb returned. He looked exhausted, covered in trail dust, and he walked straight to where Eliza stood coordinating picket schedules. I found him, the cobbler. He remembered the boots, custom order, distinctive pattern, expensive leather, made them 2 months ago for a specific customer. Caleb pulled out a folded paper. Customer's name was James Garrett, works as Hale's personal security, and according to the cobbler, Garrett ordered a second pair 3 weeks ago, said he'd worn through the first set doing rough work. Did he keep records? Proof of the purchase? Better. He kept the original mold for the boot sole. Gave it to me. Caleb set a wooden form on the table. This matches the print Doc Morrison found at the fire scene. Perfectly. Around them, the unsuitable army had gone silent, everyone recognizing the magnitude of this discovery. We have him, Mrs. Chen breathed. We have proof that Hale's man set fire. Cannot deny, cannot dismiss, cannot blame on unsuitable teacher. We need to move fast, Harrison said. Present this to the territorial marshal, not the local sheriff. Get someone outside Hale's influence to make the arrest. The marshal's circuit brings him through Red Hollow in 2 days, Doc Morrison added. We present the evidence then at a public forum where Hale can't suppress it. He'll run, someone warned. The moment he knows we have this, he'll disappear. Then we don't let him know. Eliza's mind was already racing ahead. We keep up the pressure, keep him focused on all the other fires we've lit. Let him think the boot print is just another dead end. And when the marshal arrives, we hit him with everything at once. The arson evidence, the tax fraud, the safety violations, all of it. An avalanche too big to escape. Risky, Caleb said. If he suspects, if someone tips him off, everything's risky, but we've come too far to play it safe now. The vote was silent, but unanimous. Unsuitable people didn't retreat at the finish line. 2 days later, the territorial marshal rode into Red Hollow with an escort of federal deputies, responding to Harrison's formal request for assistance with matters of public safety and potential federal crimes. The marshal was a hard man named Cortez, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Hale greeted him personally, all charm and cooperation, clearly expecting to control this interaction like he controlled everything else. He didn't expect the town hall to be packed with unsuitable witnesses. Eliza presented first, laying out the pattern of intimidation and abuse. Then came the miners with their injuries. Then the strikers with documentation of wage theft. Then the newspaper editor with evidence of tax fraud, each piece building on the last, creating a picture of systematic corruption. Hale's lawyer objected, threatened, demanded dismissals, but Cortez listened to everything with impassive attention. Then Doc Morrison stood and presented his findings about the fire, the accelerant patterns, the multiple ignition points, and the boot print that proved deliberate arson. "And do you know who made this print?" Cortez asked. "We do." Caleb stepped forward with the cobbler's testimony and the boot form. James Garrett, who works as Victor Hale's personal security, custom boots, distinctive sole, matches the print perfectly. The cobbler in Cheyenne confirms he made them specifically for Garrett 2 months before the fire. The room erupted. Hale shot to his feet, his face a mask of rage and denial. "This is a setup, a conspiracy by unsuitable elements to destroy a law-abiding businessman. My employee's boots at a fire scene proves nothing. It proves someone wearing his custom-made, one-of-a-kind boots was at the scene of an arson during the time the fire was set," Cortez cut in. "And combined with witness testimony about the intimidation campaign against Miss Hartwell, about your threats to condemn Miss Hartwell, about your documented history of crushing anyone who opposes you, it establishes clear motive and opportunity. You can't possibly—" "I can and will. James Garrett is under arrest for arson. You, Mr. Hale, are under investigation for conspiracy, tax fraud, and about a dozen federal labor violations." Cortez nodded to his deputies. "Take him." What happened next burned itself into Eliza's memory forever. Victor Hale, the man who'd ruled Red Hollow through fear and money and carefully cultivated power, standing in the center of a packed hall while federal deputies approached with handcuffs, his perfect composure shattering, his authority evaporating like morning mist, and unsuitable people watching it happen with fierce, triumphant joy. He tried to run, actually pushed past his lawyer and made for the door, as if flight could save him now. The deputies caught him in 3 strides, and the handcuffs clicked shut with a sound like finality. "This isn't over," Hale shouted as they dragged him toward the door. "You think you've won? You've destroyed this town. Without me, Red Hollow will collapse. The mine, the mill, the businesses I built." "We'll rebuild," Eliza said quietly, "without you crushing us under your boot." He stared at her, and for a moment she saw past the rage to something else, incomprehension. He genuinely couldn't understand how he'd lost, how unsuitable people had beaten him. "You should have left on that train," he said. "Probably, but then I would have missed this." They took him away, and the hall exploded into celebration. People crying, embracing, laughing with relief and disbelief, and the giddy recognition that they'd actually done it. They'd brought down a tyrant. Mrs. Chen found Eliza in the chaos and gripped both her hands. "We won! We won! Now harder work begins, rebuilding, healing, making sure unsuitable victory become permanent change, not just temporary upset." But she was smiling. "But tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we work. Tonight, we be unsuitable and proud." The celebration spilled into the streets, impromptu and joyful. Someone brought fiddles. The Irish workers sang. Children who should have been in bed danced between adults who'd forgotten what joy felt like. Red Hollow transformed, just for one night, into a place where unsuitable meant triumphant. Caleb found Eliza on the edge of the celebration, watching it all with quiet wonder. "You did it," he said. "We did it. No, you started it. On that train platform when you chose to stay. Everything that happened after flowed from that choice." He moved closer. "You changed this town, Eliza. Changed me. Changed Sarah. Changed everyone who learned that unsuitable just means brave enough to challenge what's broken." I just refuse to run. That's what courage is. Refusing to run when running makes sense. His hand found hers. What happens now? Now we rebuild that schoolhouse. And when it's ready, we fill it with unsuitable children learning unsuitable ideas about equality and justice and the revolutionary notion that they all matter. She looked up at him. Think Red Hollow's ready for that? I think Red Hollow better get ready, because unsuitable women don't ask permission anymore. She laughed, and it felt like freedom. The celebration lasted until dawn painted the mountains gold, but the real work began when the sun rose over a town that had to learn how to stand without the weight of Victor Hale's boot on its neck. Eliza stood in the ruins of the schoolhouse 3 days after Hale's arrest, surrounded by the charred skeleton of what had been her workplace, her battlefield, her beginning. The smell of smoke still clung to everything, acrid and bitter, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing it all. We're going to rebuild it bigger, Harrison said, appearing beside her with rolled architectural plans tucked under his arm. The council voted unanimously last night. New schoolhouse, twice the size, with a proper library and science equipment. Funded by the seizure of Hale's assets, seems only fair that his money pays for the education he tried to destroy. The council voted unanimously? Eliza raised an eyebrow. I seem to remember 3 members being firmly in Hale's pocket. They discovered sudden attacks of conscience when federal investigators started asking questions about who knew what and when. Harrison's smile was grim. Amazing how quickly bought men find their principles when the buyers headed to prison. What about his businesses, the mine, the mill, all his operations? Being sold off piece by piece, the territorial governor's office is overseeing it, making sure they go to operators who will actually follow safety regulations and pay fair wages. Miguel Martinez and some of the other miners are pooling resources to buy the mine themselves, turn it into a worker cooperative. He unrolled the plans, spreading them across a charred beam. But I didn't come here to talk about Hale's empire. I came to ask if you'd like input on the new school's design. Why would I have input? I'm not a teacher anymore. Aren't you? Harrison's eyes twinkled. Because the new school board, after we replace the members who fired you, has a question. They'd like to know if you'd consider serving as headmistress of the new academy, not just teaching, but running the whole operation, setting curriculum, hiring teachers, establishing the philosophy of education for the entire institution. Eliza's breath caught. They can't be serious. Dead serious. You proved you care more about children's futures than about keeping powerful men comfortable. That's exactly what this town needs, leading its education. He paused. There's a condition, though. You have to promise to keep being unsuitable. Keep pushing boundaries, keep treating every child like they matter, keep making narrow-minded people uncomfortable. Think you can handle that? She looked at the ruins around her, then at the plans in Harrison's hands. Sketches of a building that would rise from ashes, stronger and better than before. A place where Sarah could study medicine without apology. Where Tommy Martinez could learn that his father's dignity mattered more than his employer's profits. Where unsuitable children could become unsuitable adults who changed the world. I think I can manage that. The reconstruction began immediately, and it became Red Hollow's collective project. The Irish workers from the mill brought lumber, donated from the new ownership, who discovered that treating employees with respect made them remarkably generous. The miners contributed stone from the quarry. Mrs. Chen organized the unsuitable women into work crews that brought food, managed supplies, and kept everyone fed and focused. Even children helped, carrying tools and clearing debris with the seriousness of people who understood they were building their own future. Caleb showed up every day after ranch work, his carpentry skills put to use framing walls and hanging doors. He worked beside Eliza, their conversations flowing easily between hammer strokes, building something together that felt like more than just a school. Sarah's been asking questions, he said one afternoon, his voice carefully casual. About you and me, about whether you're going to be around permanent-like, or if you might still get on that train someday. What did you tell her? Told her that's your choice to make, not mine. But she wanted me to mention that she'd be real disappointed if you left. Said she's counting on you being around to help with her medical studies. He set down his hammer, met her eyes. I might have mentioned I'd be disappointed too. Might have? Would be. Will continue to be if you ever think about leaving. He cleared his throat. Eliza, I know this isn't the time or place, and I know we've got a school to build and a town to fix, but I need to say something before I lose my nerve. Caleb, I'm in love with you. Have been since you faced down that mob with nothing but sharp words and absolute refusal to be afraid. Maybe even since that first day on the train platform when you chose fighting over safety. And I know you've got bigger plans than settling down with a rancher and his stubborn daughter, but I needed you to know, needed to say it out loud at least once. Eliza's hammer slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. You're in love with me. Have been for months. Probably will be for the rest of my life, regardless of what you decide about it. That's not fair. I know, but I couldn't keep carrying it around unsaid, especially not after watching you almost go to prison for having the courage to be honest. Figured I owed you the same courage. He picked up his hammer again, his ears red with embarrassment. You don't have to say anything, just wanted you to know. But Eliza caught his hand before he could retreat into work. I'm terrified. Of what? Of how much I care about you. About Sarah. About this life we're building. I came here planning to leave after 1 year, to use Red Hollow as a stepping stone to somewhere bigger and better. Then I stayed because leaving felt like surrender. And now I'm staying because I can't imagine being anywhere else. Because unsuitable women and stubborn ranchers and children who dream of being doctors feel more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Is that a yes? It's a, I'm terrified, but I'm staying anyway. Is that close enough? His smile was like sunrise. More than close enough. They worked side by side the rest of the afternoon, not talking much but not needing to, their silence comfortable and full of possibility. Around them, the school took shape, beam by beam, becoming something solid and real and permanent. 2 months later, Margaret Pemberton appeared at Mrs. Chen's laundry with an unexpected proposal. I've been thinking about education, she said, her nervous energy barely contained as Eliza poured tea. About how I failed Sarah and Tommy and all the children who needed advocates and got silence instead. About how I could have used my position as a banker's wife to push for change, but chose comfort over courage. You recanted your testimony, Eliza reminded her. You stood up when it mattered. That counts for something. It counts for not sending an innocent woman to prison. It doesn't count for actually making things better. Margaret set down her teacup with decision. I want to help with the new school, not teaching. I'm not qualified for that. But fundraising, organization, community outreach. I know every family in this town, suitable and unsuitable alike. I can help bridge the gap, help the school serve everyone instead of just the children whose parents have the right connections. Why? Eliza asked. You could rebuild your social standing, go back to being a respectable banker's wife who doesn't associate with unsuitable elements. Because being respectable nearly cost me my soul. And because my daughter is 7 years old and she watches everything I do, and I want her to see her mother being brave instead of convenient. Margaret's voice strengthened. I know I can't undo the damage I did, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to be the person I should have been from the start. Mrs. Chen, who'd been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. Unsuitable army always has room for converts. Welcome to Revolution, Mrs. Pemberton. Hope you're ready for hard work. I am. I really am. She proved it over the following weeks, using her social connections to solicit donations, organize fundraisers, and convince wealthy families that investing in education for all children benefited the entire community. Some doors slammed in her face, the old guard who still clung to Hale's vision of hierarchy and order. But others opened, revealing people who'd been waiting for permission to care, who'd wanted to help but hadn't known how until unsuitable women showed them the way. The school's dedication ceremony happened on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after Victor Hale's arrest, and 3 months before his trial. The building stood proud against the mountain backdrop, its fresh-cut timber gleaming gold in the sunlight, its windows reflecting the crowd that gathered for the celebration. Eliza stood on the new porch, looking out at faces that had become familiar over these months of transformation. The unsuitable army stood in the front, Mrs. Chen with her iron-gray hair and fiercer pride, Miguel Martinez leaning on his cane but standing tall, the Irish workers who'd struck for dignity and won it, Doc Morrison who'd documented truth when lies were easier. Behind them, the rest of Red Hollow, suitable and unsuitable mixing together in a way that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Sarah sat in the first row, practically vibrating with excitement. Beside her, Caleb caught Eliza's eye and nodded encouragement. "I'm supposed to give a speech," Eliza began, and the crowd quieted. Something inspiring about education and opportunity and the future we're building together. "But I think you've all heard enough speeches from me. Instead, I want to tell you about a choice." She descended the steps, moving among the crowd so they could see her face clearly. "A year ago, I stood on a train platform ready to leave Red Hollow forever. I'd been fired for treating children like they mattered. I'd been branded unsuitable, and I was angry and hurt and so tired of fighting. Getting on that train was the sensible choice, the safe choice, the choice that would have protected me from everything that came after, the vandalism, the threats, the arrest, all of it. But I didn't get on that train because a stubborn rancher grabbed my wrist and asked me to stay, asked me to fight, asked me to be as brave as I'd been trying to be and to keep being unsuitable even when it got hard." She looked at Caleb, who smiled that almost smile that had become her favorite sight in the world. "This school exists because unsuitable people made unsuitable choices. Mrs. Chen chose to hire a disgraced teacher when everyone warned her not to. The miners chose to speak up about their injuries when silence was safer. Margaret Pemberton chose truth over comfort. All of you chose to stand together when standing alone was all you'd ever known. And those choices, those supposedly unsuitable, improper, inconvenient choices, changed everything." She gestured to the building behind her. "This isn't just a school. It's proof that unsuitable people build better futures. It's a promise that every child who walks through these doors matters, regardless of their name or their family's wealth or what language they speak at home. It's a declaration that Red Hollow belongs to all of us, not just the powerful few. And it exists because we chose courage over comfort. So I'm not going to give you an inspiring speech about the future. I'm going to ask you to make another choice. Choose to keep being unsuitable. Keep questioning authority that doesn't serve justice. Keep standing up for people who get pushed down. Keep building the kind of community where a former teacher and a Chinese laundry owner and an Irish washerwoman and a Mexican miner all count as equals. Because that's the only way this victory becomes permanent, if we keep choosing it every single day, even when it gets hard again." The applause started quietly, then built like thunder. People stood, some crying, all of them recognizing the weight of what they'd accomplished together. Harrison stepped forward with a ribbon and oversized scissors, grinning like a man half his age. "Then I declare the Red Hollow Academy for Unsuitable Education officially open." The ribbon fell, and children rushed past into the new building, their excitement echoing through halls that had never known the weight of prejudice or the boundaries of limited dreams. Eliza followed them inside, watching as they explored classrooms stocked with books that didn't segregate knowledge by gender or background, laboratories where curiosity mattered more than propriety, a library that treated all stories as valuable. Sarah found her in the library, arms full of medical texts that Harrison had personally ordered from back east. "Miss Hartwell, Headmistress Hartwell," Sarah's eyes shone. "Is it true that I can really study medicine here, that you'll help me prepare for medical college?" "It's true. Though the path won't be easy, medical schools still don't accept many women, and the ones that do demand excellence beyond what they expect from men. That's okay. I'm unsuitable. I work harder anyway." Sarah's grin was pure determination. "Besides, Pa says unsuitable women change the rules by refusing to follow them. So maybe by the time I'm old enough for medical school, there won't be rules against women anymore. And if there are, I'll just be unsuitable enough to break them. Your father's raising a revolutionary. He learned from the best." That evening, after the crowds dispersed and the building settled into its new existence, Eliza walked the empty halls with a lamp, checking that everything was secure for the night. Her footsteps echoed on polished wood floors, and the smell of fresh paint mingled with new books and possibility. She found Caleb waiting on the front steps, his horse tied nearby. "Thought you might need an escort home," he said. "Town's safer now, but old habits." "Old habits like protecting unsuitable women from themselves?" "Something like that." He stood, brushed sawdust from his pants. "The school's beautiful, Eliza. Everything you dreamed of and more." "We dreamed of," she corrected. "I couldn't have built this alone." "Maybe not, but you started it. You're the one who refused to get on that train." He moved closer, and the lamplight caught the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes that came from years of squinting at horizons. Question is, are you still thinking about trains? Still dreaming of bigger cities and more prestigious positions? I used to. When I first came here, I thought Red Hollow was a punishment, a backwater where unsuitable teachers got exiled when real schools wouldn't have them. I was going to endure 1 year, collect my reference, and escape to somewhere that mattered. And now? Now I think maybe I was wrong about what matters. Prestigious schools in big cities already have plenty of advocates. They don't need me. But Red Hollow needed someone stubborn enough to fight for children who get overlooked everywhere else. Needed someone unsuitable enough to build something new instead of accepting what was. She set down her lamp and took both his hands, feeling the calluses that matched her own now, the strength built through shared work and shared purpose. I'm not going anywhere, Caleb. This is home. You and Sarah and Mrs. Chen and every unsuitable soul in this town. You're my family now, and I'm staying. Even though it's hard, even though there will be more fights, more people who resist change, more obstacles, especially because of that. Unsuitable women don't quit when things get difficult. We double down. He kissed her then, gentle and sure, a promise made without words. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, he rested his forehead against hers. Mary would have loved you, would have said I was the luckiest stubborn fool alive. Was she always right? Always. They walked home together through streets that had transformed from hostile to familiar, past buildings where unsuitable people ran unsuitable businesses, under stars that didn't care about social standing or propriety or any of the small-minded rules that had once governed this town. At Mrs. Chen's laundry, lights still burned in the upstairs windows. The old woman appeared in the doorway as they approached, her expression knowing. You two finally figure out what everyone else see for months? Maybe, Eliza admitted. Good. About time. Now come inside. I make tea. We plan next revolution. At their confused looks, she laughed. You think building school enough? We just starting. Next we fix medical care. Too expensive, too far away. Then we organize workers across all businesses, make sure no one ever exploit them like Hale did. Then we... Mrs. Chen, Caleb interrupted gently. Maybe we could have one night without planning revolutions? I suppose. One night, but tomorrow we change world again. Deal? Deal. Inside, over tea and the comfortable conversation of people who'd fought wars together and won, Eliza felt the last piece of her old self slip away. The woman who'd arrived in Red Hollow a year ago, angry, hurt, desperate to prove herself, had been transformed by unsuitable choices into someone stronger. Someone who knew that power wasn't about controlling others, but about lifting them up. Someone who understood that the best victories were the ones shared with people brave enough to fight beside you. The trial of Victor Hale happened 3 months later in the territorial capital, and half of Red Hollow made the journey to watch justice being served. Eliza sat in the courtroom's gallery, flanked by Mrs. Chen and Caleb, while witness after witness testified to Hale's crimes. The tax fraud, the safety violations, the intimidation campaigns. And finally, the arson, James Garrett, Hale's security man, had taken a plea deal and testified that Hale had personally ordered the schoolhouse burned, had provided the accelerant, had promised protection from consequences. Hale's lawyers fought viciously, but unsuitable truth backed by evidence was stronger than expensive legal maneuvering. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison, with additional fines that would bankrupt what remained of his empire. As the marshals led him away in chains, Hale's eyes found Eliza in the crowd. You destroyed everything I built, he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. No, she replied, you destroyed it yourself. I just made sure everyone could see the damage. She felt no triumph watching him disappear into custody, only a bone-deep relief that his particular kind of fear would no longer govern Red Hollow. The power he'd wielded had been real, but it had also been fragile, dependent on silence, on isolation, on people believing they couldn't fight back. Unsuitable people had proved that belief wrong. The journey back to Red Hollow took 2 days, and the town that greeted them had continued changing in their absence. New businesses had opened in the buildings seized from Hale's estate. The worker cooperative at the mine had implemented safety reforms that made it the most secure operation in the territory. The mill workers had negotiated profit-sharing agreements with the new owners. Everywhere Eliza looked, she saw unsuitable people building unsuitable futures that would have been impossible a year ago. The school thrived. Enrollment had doubled, with families traveling from neighboring towns to access education that didn't limit their children's potential. Eliza hired 3 new teachers, all of them unsuitable in their own ways, all of them committed to the revolutionary idea that every child deserved investment regardless of circumstances. Sarah excelled in every subject, her medical ambitions growing more concrete as she discovered the joy of science and the satisfaction of understanding how things worked. One evening, nearly a year to the day after she'd refused to board that train, Eliza stood in her classroom preparing the next day's lessons. The room still smelled faintly of new wood and chalk dust, and the windows showed red hollows settling into twilight. A knock at the door. Mrs. Chen entered, moving slower these days, but no less fierce, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "For you! From Unsuitable Army, sort of anniversary present." "Anniversary of what?" "Of you being stubborn enough to stay." Mrs. Chen set the package on the desk. "Open." Inside was a framed photograph. The whole Unsuitable Army gathered in front of the school on dedication day. Mrs. Chen front and center, her expression proud. Miguel Martinez standing tall despite his cane. The Irish workers, the miners, Doc Morrison, Margaret Pemberton, Harrison, and dozens of others who'd found courage together. And in the middle, Caleb and Sarah, on either side of Eliza, all 3 of them smiling, like people who'd discovered something precious. Below the photograph, words had been engraved on a brass plate. "Unsuitable people building unsuitable futures. Red Hollow Academy, 1887. "It's perfect," Eliza whispered. "We think so too. Hang it where students can see. Remind them that unsuitable just means brave enough to challenge what broken. Remind them they come from long line of people who refused to accept world as it was, who built something better instead. Mrs. Chen, I thank you for everything, for hiring me when no one else would, for standing with me when it got dangerous, for teaching me that unsuitable is the best thing anyone can be. Thank you for staying, for choosing hard road instead of easy escape, for showing old unsuitable woman that revolution's still possible, even in small town that think it too scared to change." Mrs. Chen gripped her hand. "You know what best part is? This not ending. This just beginning. Children in this school, they grow up knowing unsuitable normal. They become doctors, lawyers, business owners, teachers. They change whole territory, maybe whole country. And it start because one stubborn woman refused to get on train. One stubborn woman and an entire army of unsuitable people. Yes, but you the spark. We just gasoline." Mrs. Chen grinned. "Very unsuitable gasoline." That night, Caleb and Sarah came for dinner at Mrs. Chen's invitation. They'd been doing this weekly now, these family dinners that weren't quite official, but felt more real than any legal arrangement. Sarah chattered about her studies, about the anatomy text Doc Morrison had loaned her, about her plans to apprentice with him next summer. Caleb listened with the patient attention of a father who knew his daughter would achieve everything she dreamed and more. After dinner, while Mrs. Chen and Sarah cleaned up, the older woman insisting on teaching the girl proper housekeeping alongside medicine, because unsuitable women needed to be practical too, Caleb pulled Eliza aside. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "About us, about Sarah, about what comes next, and I think it's time to make some unsuitable choices of our own." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. "Mary's ring. I've been carrying it around for 2 months, trying to find the perfect moment to ask. Then I realized unsuitable people don't wait for perfect moments. We make them." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "Eliza Hartwell, you're the most stubborn, unsuitable, revolutionary woman I've ever met. You made me believe change was possible when I'd given up hope. You showed Sarah that her dreams mattered. You transformed an entire town through sheer refusal to accept injustice. And I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone. So I'm asking, will you marry this unsuitable rancher and help him raise an unsuitable daughter who wants to be a doctor?" Eliza looked at the ring, then at Caleb's face, honest and hopeful and absolutely certain. Behind them, through the doorway, She could see Sarah and Mrs. Chen pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. "Yes," she said, "on one condition. Anything. We get married at the school, with the unsuitable army as witnesses. And we make it clear that this isn't me giving up my work or my independence. It's two unsuitable people choosing to fight together instead of alone. I wouldn't want it any other way." He slipped the ring on her finger, and Sarah's delighted shriek echoed through the house. Mrs. Chen appeared with tea and cookies, muttering about stubborn people finally figuring out what everyone else knew, but her eyes were suspiciously bright. The wedding happened on a spring morning when the mountains still wore snowcaps, but the valleys bloomed with wildflowers. The school's front lawn became the ceremony site, and the unsuitable army gathered in their finest clothes, which ranged from Sunday best to clean work shirts, because unsuitable people didn't care about matching standards. Margaret Pemberton had organized everything with the efficiency of a general planning campaigns. The Irish workers provided music. Mrs. Chen cooked enough food to feed half the territory. Doc Morrison stood as Caleb's best man, while Sarah served as Eliza's maid of honor with a seriousness that made everyone smile. Harrison officiated, reading the vows they'd written together, promises about partnership and equality and fighting for justice while building a life together. When he pronounced them married, Eliza kissed her unsuitable husband surrounded by unsuitable friends, and the celebration that followed lasted until the stars came out. Late in the evening, Eliza found herself standing at the school's entrance, watching the party continue on the lawn. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her with 2 glasses of wine. "You happy?" "Terrified and happy. Is that normal?" "For unsuitable women? Very normal. We always terrified of good things, scared they disappear, scared we not deserve them." Mrs. Chen clinked her glass against Eliza's. "But you deserve this. Deserve love, deserve success, deserve every good thing that comes from choosing courage over comfort." I keep thinking about that train, about how close I came to leaving. If Caleb hadn't grabbed my wrist, if I'd been just a little more practical. But you stayed. That's the only fact that matters. You stayed, you fought, you changed everything. Now you get to enjoy what you built. Eliza sipped her wine, watching Caleb dance with Sarah, both of them laughing at his terrible rhythm. Watching the unsuitable army celebrate together, their joy hard-won and therefore precious. Watching the school stand solid against the darkening sky, its windows promising futures that hadn't existed a year ago. "Mrs. Chen, do you ever think about what comes next, after we've won all the battles we set out to fight? We never win all battles. Always more work. Always more unsuitable people who need help. More injustice that need challenging. More small-minded people who need their minds expanded." Mrs. Chen's smile was fierce. "But that okay. Unsuitable women, we not afraid of hard work. We afraid of being comfortable and useless. We afraid of stopping the fight before it finished. Then I guess we keep fighting. Always. But maybe take tonight off. Celebrate victory, enjoy love, be happy unsuitable woman who got everything she never knew she wanted." Mrs. Chen patted her hand. "Revolution wait until tomorrow. Tonight, you dance with your unsuitable husband and dream unsuitable dreams about unsuitable future." So Eliza did. She danced with Caleb under the stars, celebrated with the army that had become her family, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of impossible happiness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. There would be more fights for justice, more unsuitable people who needed advocates, more work to transform Red Hollow from what it had been into what it could be. But tonight, in this moment, standing on ground they'd won together, Eliza Hartwell, formerly disgraced teacher, now headmistress, wife, and permanent resident of Red Hollow, understood something fundamental about unsuitable people. They didn't win by being stronger or richer or more powerful than their opponents. They won by refusing to quit, by standing together when standing alone was all they'd known, by choosing courage over comfort every single day until unsuitable became the new normal. And once unsuitable became normal, everything changed. Years later, when Sarah Martinez Ward graduated from medical school, the 3rd woman in her class and the first to graduate top of her year, she stood at the podium and told the story of her hometown, of a teacher who refused to leave, of a laundry owner who weaponized kindness, of miners and workers and washerwomen who discovered their power, of a town that had been ruled by fear until unsuitable people decided fear didn't get to win anymore. My stepmother taught me that unsuitable just means you're doing something that scares people in power, Sarah said to the assembled graduates. And my advice to all of you is simple. Be unsuitable. Challenge what's broken. Stand up for people who get pushed down. Build the futures that others say are impossible. And when people tell you to be practical, to be realistic, to accept the world as it is, remember that unsuitable people are the only ones who ever change anything. The audience applauded, but Sarah's eyes found the back of the hall, where Eliza and Caleb sat with Mrs. Chen, all three of them older now, but no less fierce. She smiled at them, the unsuitable army that had taught her everything that mattered, and continued, "This diploma says I'm qualified to practice medicine, but the real qualification I carry is something my family taught me. Be brave enough to stay when leaving is easier. Be stubborn enough to fight when fighting seems pointless. Be unsuitable enough to build something better than what you inherited. And never, ever get on that train when unsuitable people need you to stay." Later, at the celebration dinner in a restaurant that wouldn't have served half their party 15 years ago, Eliza raised her glass in a toast. To unsuitable people everywhere, may we always be too stubborn to quit, too brave to run, and too committed to justice to ever accept comfort over courage. And may we never stop building futures that the powerful say are impossible. To unsuitable people, the chorus responded, glasses clinking, laughter rising, the unsuitable army celebrating another victory in a war that would never truly end. Because unsuitable people understood something essential. The fight for justice wasn't a destination. It was a choice made daily, a commitment renewed with every sunrise, a revolution that lived in the small acts of standing up, speaking out, and refusing to let fear win. Eliza had made that choice on a train platform in Red Hollow when a stubborn rancher asked her to stay, and she decided that fighting was worth more than safety. Everything else had followed from that single unsuitable moment, and she would make the same choice every day for the rest of her life, teaching unsuitable children, loving her unsuitable family, and building unsuitable futures alongside people who understood that revolution wasn't a war you won once. It was a life you lived deliberately, courageously, unsuitably, until the world had no choice but to change.